Hey everyone, a quick heads up. Most people who enjoy these stories haven't subscribed yet. If you're liking the content, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It truly supports the channel. And I'm glad you're here. Also, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so share your location in the comments. I still run nights, but I don't run that stretch anymore. If you've ever hauled across Nevada in winter, you know what I mean when I say the sky feels too big. It's not just dark, it's open. Like if your headlights ever cut off, you just fall straight upward into nothing. That night, I was running a standard lane I'd done 100 times before. Reefer loaded with frozen goods out of Barstow, headed up through the desert toward Utah. Same white Cascadia I've been driving for years. Same route, same way stations, same lonely exits that sneak up on you out of blackness. I'd left the last truck stop around 11 p.m., filled the thermos with burnt coffee, hit the head, checked the straps and tires. It was cold enough that the diesel felt thick under my boots when I walked past the tanks. Breath coming out in white clouds, blowing sideways in the wind. The kind of winter desert night that chews through your jacket and settles into your bones. By the time I got onto that long, empty stretch, it was just me, the hum of the tires, and the white line. No traffic ahead, none behind. CB was mostly dead. Just a little static and the occasional distant crackle that never fully formed into words. I remember glancing at the dash clock, 12:06 a.m. The outside temp read 17 degrees Fahrenheit. I settled into that zone every long-haul guy knows. Hands at 10 and 2, mirrors checked every few seconds. Headlights cutting a tight tunnel through the dark. The reefer unit behind me thumping its steady rhythm, keeping someone's frozen pizzas rock solid. Somewhere after midnight, I passed mile marker 14. I remember that one clearly because it was leaning a little, like something had nudged it hard a long time ago. I made a mental note. 5 more miles and I'll stretch my fingers. Maybe switch up the playlist. Little tricks so you don't zone out too hard. The desert out there in winter is quiet in a way that gets under your skin. No insects, no distant highway roar. Just wind sometimes. And my truck, loud inside but somehow tiny out there. At 19, everything changed. I didn't see it gradually. There was no shape on the horizon slowly resolving into a person. 1 second, the road ahead was empty. The next second, my headlights washed over something standing dead center in my lane. Tall. Too tall. Thin, like somebody had taken a human silhouette and stretched it upward. No features. Just a vertical, wrong-shaped shadow in the high beams. I don't remember making the decision to brake. My foot just slammed down. The ABS kicked in hard, pedal jittering under my boot. The whole cab shook, load surging behind me as 40,000 pounds of frozen food tried to ignore physics. The horn blared once. My hand had hit it on reflex, and that sound ripped through the night like it didn't belong there. I expected impact. Expected that sickening bump and the chaos that comes after. Glass, metal, paperwork, lawyers. Instead, all I got was screeching tires, a screaming reefer alarm, and the smell of hot rubber. I came to a stop dead in the lane. Heart pounding. Fingers locked around the wheel so tight they hurt. The high beams still burning a hole straight ahead. But the road? Empty. Just wet blacktop and the broken white line disappearing into the dark. Whatever I'd seen wasn't there. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine, the little creaks of the cab, the distant whine of the reefer behind me. The only light was my own. No cars coming in either direction. No troopers. No animal darting away. Okay, I told myself out loud. You're tired. You're cold. You're seeing things. I eased it back into gear, rolled forward, and got off that exact spot as fast as I could without pushing it. A couple miles later, just when my breathing had finally started to slow, the CB crackled. Not the normal quick burst of static. This came in like someone turning a knob slowly. A rising hiss that crawled up my spine. Then a voice came through. Clear, close, and wrong. It whispered my name. My real first name. Not my handle. Not the one other drivers know me by over the air. My legal, birth certificate name that I never say on channel. and it said it in a way I've never heard it spoken before. Like someone testing out the sounds, rolling it around in their mouth for the first time. I grabbed the mic, thumb hit the transmit out of reflex. Break 19, you calling for me? Who is this? Dead air. No carrier light. No background road noise. Just the faint hiss of an open channel that wasn't really open. I flipped through a couple channels, scanned up and down. Nothing. Not even the usual late-night nonsense you can pick up across states when the skip is just right. That's when the hair on my arms stood up. I was sweating under my jacket, but the air in the cab felt suddenly colder. Like AC had kicked on full blast even though I hadn't touched the controls. Up ahead, I saw a turnout. One of those rough little gravel pockets off the shoulder, with a tiny sign that just says, "Emergency parking only." I shouldn't have pulled off. Every logical part of me knows that. But trucker brain is practical. You think, maybe I've got a flat. Maybe something's loose on the trailer. Maybe I scared myself so bad back there that I missed something. I swung onto the turnout, tires crunching over the gravel, mirrors catching nothing but my own reflection and a sliver of stars. Killed my speed, set the brakes. The truck gave that familiar exhale as the air dumped, and suddenly the night outside felt real quiet. Too quiet. I took my flashlight, zipped my jacket, and stepped out. The cold hit me like a wall. No city glow anywhere, just pure desert night. So dark the stars looked like pinholes punched in black paper. I could hear the faint hum of the reefer, the ticking of hot metal cooling, and the wind. The ground under my boots had a thin crust of frozen moisture on it. Not full snow, more like desert frost. Every step I took around the truck made this sharp, dry crunch. I went through the checklist: tires, lines, undercarriage, trailer doors. Everything looked normal. I was just about to call it, tell myself it was all in my head, when I heard a second set of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunch, crunch, crunch. They weren't matching my steps. They were circling me, a wide arc just outside the reach of my flashlight beam. I killed my own movement instantly, stood still beside the trailer, breath fogging up in front of my face. The other steps didn't stop. They kept going, around the back of the trailer, along the blind side. Each crunch sounded heavy, like something with weight behind it. Not a rabbit, not a coyote, something with mass. I swung the flashlight around hard, beam cutting through the frost and picking out gravel, brush, the dirty white side of my trailer. Nothing, but I could hear it. Crunch, crunch. Now behind me, slow, patient, like it knew I couldn't see it and didn't care. I tried calling out. Hey, you out here? You need help. My voice sounded small and wrong against that huge dark. The steps paused for a heartbeat, then took two more. That was enough for me. I backed toward the cab, not turning my back fully, one hand feeling along the cold metal of the truck like a lifeline. The crunching sound drifted with me, keeping that same distance, like it was pacing me. By the time I got to the driver's door, my fingers were numb from cold and fear. I hauled myself up, got inside, and slammed the door harder than I meant to. The sound boomed in the cab way too loud. I locked both doors, hit the interior lights, and for the first time since I was a rookie, I honestly considered just parking there till sunrise. That's when the windshield started to fog. Not from me. The heater was on low, the cab was warm, and my breath was going straight up, dissipating. But out on the glass, right in the center, a patch of white started to bloom. Round at first, then wider, like someone had leaned in close and exhaled a long, slow breath onto the outside of my windshield. The fog thickened. I could see the pattern of it swirling, pulling to one side as if shaped by lips. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink, just stared. Then, right in the middle of that fogged patch, I saw something press from the outside. Not a full handprint, more like the suggestion of fingers dragging. Lines formed, careful, precise. From left to right, letters scratched themselves into the fog, as if an invisible fingertip was writing. YOU, space, SAW, space, ME. You saw me. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The reefer kicked over into a louder cycle at the same time, and the vibration of it made the letters shiver on the glass. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was frozen, the next I had the truck in gear, hazards off, wheel spinning, gravel back onto the highway. I didn't even bother to check my mirrors. I just got back on the road and pushed. As I merged, my headlights swept across the turnout. For a fraction of a second, I caught it again. Dead center where I'd just been parked, framed in my beams. That same tall, thin shape, taller than the cab. No detail, no face, just the outline of something standing too straight, too still. When the light hit it, it didn't flinch, didn't move, but the CB crackled at the exact same moment. A burst of static that punched straight through my skull. Then, in that same not quite a voice as before, I heard my real name again. Closer this time, like it was sitting in the passenger seat, leaning toward my ear. I floored it. The truck roared, engine climbing, the whole rig shuddering. The shape vanished out of the headlights as I passed, but the temperature in the cab dropped 20 degrees in an instant. My fingertips burned with cold on the wheel. My breath came out thick and white, right there in front of me. In the side window, reflected against the night, I saw the faintest impression of a second silhouette. Right where a passenger would be. Long, thin, head turned toward me. I didn't look directly. I watched it in the glass like you watch something out of the corner of your eye when you're scared it'll snap to attention if it knows you're looking. For 3 miles, I drove like that. Knuckles white, eyes flicking between the road and that side reflection. The CB stayed dead silent. Not even static. Just this heavy, suffocating nothingness in the speaker. At mile marker 22, the passenger side reflection blinked out. Not faded, just gone. Like someone turned off a switch. The heater kicked back to normal. The temp gauge crept up. My breath stopped fogging so thick. I didn't stop again until I found a real, lit truck stop with other rigs parked in neat rows and sodium lights turning everything that weird yellow. When I killed the engine, my hands were still shaking. I got out, walked around the truck, half expecting to see footprints in the frost or some mark on the glass. There was nothing on the windshield, except, if I tilted my head just right under the lights, I could still see faint streaks where letters had once been traced. Too perfect to be random. I checked the trailer just to give myself something to do. When I opened the doors, a wave of cold rolled out. Colder than it should have been. My breath fogged heavy in the back, thicker than outside. Right on the first pallet, pressed faintly into the frost on the shrink wrap, were 5 long streaks. Like someone had dragged their fingers down the plastic. I made the delivery next day, trucked like normal, signed, smiled, nodded, didn't say a word about what happened around mile 19. A week later, I was in a diner with a couple other drivers, swapping road stories like we do. One of the older guys, a lifer with a gray beard and a laugh that sounded like gravel, mentioned that stretch of Nevada. Said he didn't run it at night anymore. Too many wrecks, he said. Lonely highway, cold in winter. Folks see things. I asked him, as casually as I could, "You ever heard of anything around mile 19? He went quiet in a way men like him don't usually go quiet. Stared into his coffee. "Tall thing in the road?" he asked finally. "Looks like a shadow standing straight up?" My mouth went dry. "Yeah." He nodded once, slow. "Guy froze to death out there long time ago. Broke down in a cold snap. Started walking for help. Trooper said he made it about 20 miles on foot before he wandered into a lane and got clipped. Nobody stopped. By the time they found what was left of him, he was stretched out, scattered. They never recovered all of him." He looked up at me then. "They say he stands in the road now. Doesn't move. Just waits. You see him, you don't hit him. You don't stop. You don't look too long. 'Cause once you see him, he sees you." I thought about the writing on my windshield. "You saw me." I switched routes after that. Told dispatch I preferred a different run. Blamed it on construction and schedules. They didn't argue. I still pull nights. Still drink burnt coffee. Still listen to the hum of the reefer and the whine of the road. But every time the CB crackles with random static, every time I pass a lonely mile marker with nothing but desert on either side, I feel my fingers tighten on the wheel. Because I know somewhere out there, on a cold stretch of Nevada asphalt near mile marker 19, Something tall and thin is still standing in the middle of the lane, waiting for someone's headlights to find it, waiting for someone to look just a second too long. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was that night still remembers my name. I've been running the desert lanes long enough to know which stops are worth the risk. Deadwater Station was never one of them. You won't find it on most GPS units now. Just a faded dot on some out-of-date atlas, somewhere between nothing and nowhere. But that night, in the middle of a winter storm that had no business being in the desert, Deadwater was the only light I could see. I drive a red Kenworth T680 with a high roof sleeper, hauling drive-in most weeks. Reefer when the load pays better. That night I was pulling empty, deadheading back after a late drop. No weight, bad roads, and wind cutting sideways across the asphalt. The kind of mix that keeps both hands locked at 10 and 2. It was close to 2 in the morning. The sky over that stretch of highway was just a black lid with no stars. Clouds sitting low and heavy. Snow wasn't falling like it does up north. It was more like frozen sand. Little shards of ice knifing across the beams of my headlights. The road looked wet, but it wasn't. It was glazed, black ice from horizon to horizon. My dash read -12 degrees Celsius and dropping. CB was mostly quiet. Occasional static, one lonely voice an hour back talking about chain laws. Then nothing. Just the hum of my tires, the faint wah-wah of the wind around the mirrors, and the steady vibration of a diesel that's seen too many miles. Somewhere out there, maybe 40 minutes since I'd last seen another set of taillights. A flicker of sodium yellow showed up low on the horizon. I almost thought I was imagining it, the way your brain starts inventing cities when you've been staring at black for too long. Then a sign materialized in the right side beam. White reflective paint, letters half peeled. Deadwater Station, 1 mile fuel, food, showers. I'd heard of the place. Old-timers talked about it the way they talk about closed diners and ghost towns. Used to be busy, back when this route mattered. That kind of thing. I never had a reason to stop before. My usual lanes took me around it. But my fuel gauge was dropping faster than I liked in that cold. And the wind was starting to slide the empty trailer around just enough to remind me how alone I was. So I took the exit. The off-ramp curved away into pure darkness. No guardrails, no other headlights. Just my own beams catching short poles and scrub brush. Then the short stretch of cracked pavement leading up to what looked like the last functioning building on Earth. Deadwater Station looked like it had been built in the 70s and never updated. 2 fuel islands under a sagging canopy. Flickering fluorescent tube lights throwing a sick, greenish tint over everything. The pumps were old mechanical ones with rolling numbers, half buried under crusted snow and ice. The price displays were frozen on numbers too low to be real. Snow had blown sideways and stuck where it shouldn't. Up the sides of the pumps, clinging to the glass doors, building a crooked lip along the bottom of the station windows. I rolled between the pumps and stopped. The wind hit the side of the cab hard enough to rock it. When I opened the door, the cold slapped me in the face. It didn't feel like desert cold. It felt like walking into a freezer. My boots crunched on a layer of ice that had formed over the concrete. I had to hold onto the mirror bracket just to keep from sliding. There were no other vehicles. No cars, no pickups, no other rigs. Just my Kenworth idling alone under that buzzing canopy. Exhaust blowing straight sideways in the wind. I tried the nearest pump, mostly out of habit. The handle had frozen to the cradle. The digital card readout was covered in a thin sheet of ice on the inside, like the cold was coming from within the machine. I gave up and headed for the door. A little bell chimed when I stepped inside. The sound was soft, tired, like it hadn't rung in a while. The air inside was only a few degrees warmer than outside. It smelled like old coffee, burned dust, and something sour under it all, like meat that sat one day too long. Rows of faded snacks. A coffee station with a pot so blackened it could have been for decoration. A cooler humming in the corner with a hand-scribbled sign taped over its glass. Out of order. The clerk stood behind the counter, directly under a buzzing light strip. Skinny guy, late 40s maybe, with a Deadwater Station cap pulled low and a flannel shirt buttoned all the way to his neck. His eyes were the first thing that felt wrong. Not their color, just the way they locked onto me and didn't soften. No welcome, no sizing me up like a potential problem. Just a flat stare, like someone surprised to see an animal that shouldn't be alive. "You're still open?" I asked, voice sounding too loud in the empty store. He blinked like he had to remind himself I'd spoken. "We never closed." His voice was dry and slow, like it came from somewhere a few seconds behind his mouth. "Pumps are iced," I said. "You got anything running?" He glanced past me toward the canopy, then back. "Storm's bad tonight," he said instead. "You're cutting through or bedding down?" "Cutting through," I said. "I just need to top off. Grab some coffee if that's not asking too much." He didn't move, just watched me another second, that too long stare that made the hair on my arms stand up under my jacket. "Coffee's on the house," he said finally. "Pumps will run if you don't turn them off." I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? He leaned forward just enough that I noticed how still the rest of him had been. "Don't shut the truck off," he said. "Not out here. Not tonight." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "And don't stop for anyone." I should have asked. I should have laughed it off, made a joke, dragged an explanation out of him. Instead, I just nodded. "Yeah, sure." He poured me a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been reheated 3 times, and rang up a couple of packaged sandwiches that felt half frozen in my hands. The whole time, he never really took his eyes off me, like he was memorizing my face. "You running alone?" he asked when I turned to go. "Always," I said. He pressed his lips together like he wanted to say something else. Then he just said, "Keep the wheels turning. Storm's bad." When I stepped back outside, the wind hit harder. The snow sliced across the forecourt in sheets, piling against my tires. My rig looked smaller than it should under that bruised sky. The pump actually worked. I don't know how, with the ice on it, but when I jammed my card into the reader and squeezed the handle, diesel flowed, slow and cold, into the tank. I topped off, shoved the handle back, and didn't bother with a receipt. Every instinct in me in that moment screamed the same thing the clerk had said: "Don't shut it off." So I didn't. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and let the truck idle high. The interior felt tighter, warmer, a little bubble of light and noise fighting back the dark pressing against the windows. That's when I saw the pickup. It was on its side in the right-hand ditch, front end crumpled, back wheels still slowly spinning. Headlights pointed into the dark, throwing a weak, wavering beam across scrub and ice. Hazard lights blinked an uneven rhythm, one faster than the other. Right in front of it, in the edge of my lane, stood a woman. She was waving both arms over her head, small figure in a dark coat, hair whipping across her face in the wind. Headlights hit the wet shine on her cheeks. Tears, I thought. Her movements were frantic, the way people move when they're past scared and into pure survival mode. My foot eased off the accelerator before my brain caught up. That reflex to help is hardwired. Out here, we're often the first ones on scene. Could be minutes or an hour before a trooper shows up. I reached for the four-way switch. Then something tightened in my chest. Her shadow. In that kind of storm, with my beams coming straight down the lane, her shadow should have stretched long and straight away from me, falling across the ditch, across the truck. Didn't. Her shadow stretched sideways. Long, thin, dragging out toward the opposite side of the road, like the light source was somewhere above and behind her, not in front of her. It bent wrong when she moved. Too slow, like it was stuck in thicker air than the rest of the world. I tapped the brakes, engine braking more than pedal, trailer nudging my back slightly. She stepped closer. Within the reach of my headlights, everything about her was clear. Brown coat, cheap fabric already soaked through. Jeans dark with melted snow. Shoes too thin for this weather. But her face, it didn't change. No shift from fear to relief when she saw I was slowing. No tightening, no widening of the eyes, no trembling lips. Her mouth was slightly open, like she'd started to say something hours ago and never finished. Her eyes were fixed on the cab, on me, but they had the same glassy look I'd seen in bodies at accident scenes. Her arms kept moving up and down, that same frantic wave. But her shoulders didn't rock with emotion. It was like someone had attached her limbs to invisible strings and made them jerk. Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. I eased back onto the throttle instead of coming to a full stop. The truck's nose dipped slightly, then pulled forward. I flicked the high beams once, a reflexive ICU gesture. That's when her mouth opened wider. Not like a scream, more like a hinge letting go. But the sound that came out didn't belong to a human throat. It was metal, like two pieces of steel being forced past each other. A scraping, crushing shriek that hit the cab through the glass and the engine and the storm, right into my teeth. It had weight to it, that sound, like it pressed against my chest. My mirrors vibrated. The steering wheel shuddered under my hands. I slammed the accelerator down. The truck lurched. The trailer slid half a foot sideways before biting again. My instincts screamed about black ice, jackknifing, rollovers, but another instinct screamed louder. Get away. I watched her in the mirror as I pulled past. She didn't stay by the wreck. She dropped. Not collapsed, dropped like someone cut her strings. Her arms hit the road at the same time her feet did, body bending in one unnatural, insect-like movement. Then she ran. On all fours. I've seen dogs chase rigs. I've seen kids run after trucks pulling out of small towns. Nothing moves like that woman did. Her hands and feet hit the asphalt at the same time. Limbs a blur, spine arched too high. She ate up the distance between us in seconds, faster than I could make myself believe. Her face stayed turned up toward me the whole time, that blank expression fixed, eyes too wide, too bright in the red glow of my taillights. The scraping scream rose again, louder, higher, metal grinding metal, like the sound was chasing me as much as she was. My tires fought for traction. The tatch climbed. Speedometer inched up. 40, 45, 50. The storm warped the edges of the road into shifting shadows. She kept pace at first, then fell back, then surged forward again, hitting some invisible second gear. And then the CB crackled. Not with static, with a voice. You didn't stop, did you? It was the Deadwater clerk. Same dry tone, same slow cadence. Like he was sitting in the passenger seat, speaking directly into my ear. I snatched the mic. What the hell is that? I barked before I could stop myself. My own voice shook. He ignored the question. Or maybe he never heard it. She gets stronger when you stop, he said. They all do. Keep your wheels turning. The CB clicked, cut to silence so complete it hurt. No carrier, no background hiss. Dead. I risked one more look in the mirror. She was farther back now, still on all fours, still running. But the distance between us was growing. Her movements got jerky, less fluid, like the air was thickening around her. The shadow that shouldn't have been where it was stretched thinner and thinner behind her, like something being pulled too far. The metallic scream died away, replaced by wind and engine and my own ragged breathing. At 60, she was a dark smudge. At 65, she was gone, swallowed by snow and night. I didn't speak for the rest of that drive. Didn't touch the CB again. Didn't drop below 50, even when the road wanted me to. I drove on white knuckles and pure adrenaline until the sky started to lighten behind the clouds and the storm thinned to a freezing mist. By the time I hit the next major town, my hands were cramped around the wheel, and the coffee from Deadwater sat like ice in my gut. 3 months later, I ran that route again. Warmer this time. Late spring. Curiosity got the better of me, so I took the exit to Deadwater in broad daylight. There was nothing there. The access road was cracked and half covered in sand. The station canopy still stood, but the pumps were gone. Just rusted bolts in stained concrete. The windows of the store were boarded up. The sign out front had fallen sideways. The name Deadwater half buried in dirt. A county notice was stapled to a post. Property condemned, no trespassing. I asked around at the next truck stop on the line. Couple of old guys remembered the place. Said it shut down quick all of a sudden. Rumors about inspections, violations, maybe a death on the property. One said he heard the owner just walked out into the desert one night and never came back. Nobody could tell me what happened for sure. Nobody knew a clerk who fit the man I'd talked to. I didn't push. Didn't mention the woman or the metal screams. or the way the clerk's voice had ridden my CB like it owned the channel. But I don't run that stretch in storms anymore. If the forecast calls for snow or ice over that section of highway, I reroute or park it. Dispatch can yell all they want, because somewhere out there, on a cold night in the desert, there's a flipped pickup that never really rusts, and a woman whose face doesn't change, waiting in the middle of the lane. And if you stop for her, if you open your door, kill your engine, climb down thinking you're a good person doing the right thing, I think she finally gets in. I've run enough winter miles to know what's normal and what isn't. Black ice, whiteouts, drifts across the lane. That's normal. What happened that night in the Mojave wasn't. I drive a blue Freightliner Cascadia, mid-roof sleeper, pulling a 48-foot dry van most weeks. That run, I was hauling electronics out of California, headed east. Nothing special. I've run that corridor more times than I can count. I know every rest area, every way station, every dead patch of radio. It was late January, one of those weird years when the weather's drunk. They'd been talking about a rare winter event on the radio all afternoon. Cold air dropping down, colliding with a wet system off the coast. Snow in places that weren't built for it. By midnight, I was cutting across the edge of the Mojave under a sky that didn't look real. The clouds hung low and heavy like a ceiling just above the light bar. No stars, no moon glow, just a flat, oppressive darkness overhead, and my headlights carving a narrow tunnel through falling snow. Snow in the Mojave looks wrong. It doesn't drift the way it does up north. It spins in tight little whirlpools, gathers in strange patterns along the shoulder. The ground doesn't have grass or trees to hold it, just scrub and rock and sand. So it clings to whatever it can find and leaves bare patches of black earth in between. The dash read -9 degrees Celsius when I checked it. The needle on the fuel gauge sat comfortable. Heater on low, defrost keeping the windshield just clear enough. Wipers thudded back and forth, squeaking on the downswing. The CB was quiet, just a soft hiss. No chatter, no truck stop talk, no late night singing. I had both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, eyes bouncing from the road to the mirrors to the gauges. The usual scan, the kind of rhythm that keeps you awake. Then I noticed the wind. Out here, it usually hits you in gusts, sideways blasts that shove the trailer half a foot and make you correct. This wasn't like that. Came in waves. A low, rolling pressure that started in the floor of the cab, moved up through the steering column, and into my chest. My seat vibrated under me, not shaking, not rattling, just rising and falling in a slow, steady pattern. Like breath. Inhale. The rig shivered gently, glass humming, mirrors quivering in their brackets. Exhale. The pressure eased, everything settling for a beat before the next one. At first, I thought it was just the wind hitting the trailer weird, maybe bouncing between rock walls I couldn't see. I eased off the throttle a hair, listened harder. The sound matched the feeling. Not a howl, not a roar. A deep, muffled pulse under the usual hiss of snow and engine and tire noise. A dull thump you felt more than heard, like being inside a sleeping animal's chest. I told myself it was in my head. Too much caffeine. Not enough sleep. Weird weather playing tricks with the acoustics. Then the snow changed. For the last hour, the flakes had been slanting sideways, ripping across the beam of my headlights in white streaks. The road looked like it was being sandblasted. Suddenly, it wasn't. Right in front of my truck, the snow stopped moving sideways. No gradual shift. No easing of the wind. The flakes just stood up. They began lifting straight up off the asphalt. Not drifting, not swirling. Rising in thin, vertical curtains directly from the road surface like smoke. It was like driving into an upside-down waterfall. I watched the white lines disappear under that moving veil, reappear for a second, then get swallowed again. The edges of the lane blurred. My hands tightened on the wheel. I dropped another 5 miles an hour, feeling the weight of the trailer pushing softly at my back. Easy, I muttered, more to the truck than myself. My breath fogged the glass in little bursts. I turned the defrost up a notch. Ahead, the road did something I'd only ever seen on hot days. It rippled. You know that shimmer you get above sun-baked asphalt? Heat waves making the distance look like water? That's what it looked like. A dark, wavy mirage about a quarter-mile ahead, where the beams of my lights met the curve of the earth. Only it was below freezing. The dash read -11 degrees Celsius now. My teeth clicked once when the truck hit a small dip. I blinked, looked again. The ripple didn't go away. It grew. The black surface of the highway swelled in the center of the lane. Just a little at first, like a bubble forming under a sheet of rubber. Cracks appeared along the painted line, tiny white fractures that widened as I watched. Every sane instinct I had screamed that it was just my eyes. Snow, low visibility, the kind of visual fatigue that puts phantom deer on the shoulders. Then the bulge moved. It rose higher. The asphalt actually lifted. I watched it happen. The painted line arched upward, slush sliding off in sheets. The sound reached me a beat later, a deep, groaning crack that I felt in my fillings. Shit! My foot hit the brake pedal too fast. ABS chattered under my boot. The trailer shoved hard, trying to swing. I saw the corner of my own trailer in the mirror and forced myself to ease off. Not stomp. Steering wheel straight. Gentle. The rig started to come around and then, mercifully, lined back up. I slid into the left lane, tires buzzing over the rumble strip. The bulge was right where I'd been a second ago, rising out of the road like something underneath was pushing up to the surface. The asphalt split. Not a pothole. Not a sinkhole. It cracked open in a jagged line that ran across both lanes, the edges curling upward like torn skin. Snow that had coated the centerline dropped into the dark. And then something reached out. A long, pale arm slid up through the breach. It was too thin for the length of it, skin the color of undercooked fat. The elbow bent wrong, with an extra joint where there shouldn't be one. Its hand, if you want to call it that, had too many fingers. They uncurled one by one, tapping at the air, each longer than my forearm. The thing braced those limbs on the broken edges of the asphalt and pushed. The road heaved. For a second, I saw the full shape of it below, not in detail, just in bulk. Something massive pressing against the underside of the highway, the way a whale looks when it rises just below the surface of the ocean, distorting everything above it. Snow didn't just fall into the crack. It streamed down, sucked inside in long, thin ribbons, disappearing into that black opening like breath being drawn into lungs. My cab shook as I passed. Not from the road now, but from the thing moving under it. The low, rhythmic pulse got louder. Inhale. The broken pavement yawned wider, dark gap expanding, more snow vanishing into it. Exhale. It tightened, the edges grinding back together, the pale limbs flexing and digging in. My side mirror filled with the sight of it as I cleared the worst of the buckled asphalt. I couldn't tear my eyes away, even though every safety video in the world tells you to watch the road in front, not the horror behind. The crack widened into a yawning black hole, eating the center of the highway. The yellow lines broke apart, fell, vanished. The snow lifting off the road surface all along that stretch funneled backward, streams of white converging and pouring into the gap. The whole scene looked reversed, like film run backward of an explosion. Instead of debris flying out, everything was being pulled in. The CB came alive with a screech of static so violent it hurt. I flinched. For a half second, the wheel jerked in my hands. I corrected out of pure muscle memory. Under the static, I thought I heard something. Not words, just a slow, dragging noise in the speaker, perfectly matched to the rise and fall of the road behind me. Each breath under my wheels made the plastic housing of the CB flex and creak. Then it cut dead again. No hiss, no carrier, just the hum of the engine and my heart pounding in my ears. I focused on the lane ahead. Another half-mile of warped snow and dark. No more bulges, just the ghost of what I'd seen burned into my vision. I kept my speed just high enough that I wouldn't get sucked into whatever was happening behind me, low enough that I could react if the road tried it again. Didn't. In the mirrors, the black void shrank as I put distance on it. The last thing I saw before it faded into the storm was that long, pale arm groping across the surface of the highway, feeling along the groove where my tires had been. Like it was memorizing the shape of me. I drove until dawn. Didn't stop. Didn't eat. Didn't drink. I only realized how badly my hands were shaking when the sky finally went from pitch black to washed-out gray and a truck stop billboard appeared like a miracle on the right. Inside that stop, under bright fluorescent lights and the smell of frying bacon, what I'd seen felt impossible. My boots left wet prints. My hands left little crescents of white salt on the counter when I paid. I called maintenance later that day, half out of duty, half out of a need to not be crazy. "Hey," I said, "you might want to check a stretch of highway out in the Mojave. Mile marker around." I rattled it off. Looked like a sinkhole starting. Road was buckling under the snow. Could be bad when it warms up. They thanked me, took the info, promised to forward it to the right folks. 2 days later, on my way back, I saw the orange vests. A highway maintenance crew was parked on the shoulder with a couple of pickups and a flatbed. Cones lined the lane. A guy with a stop/slow paddle waved me through. As I rolled past, I looked. The road was perfect. Fresh blacktop? No. Same old surface. Same old hairline cracks and patch spots I remembered from trips years before. The center line was intact. Snow cleared to the edges. Salt dusted in a fine layer. No bulges. No tears. No sign of anything ever having been wrong. On the CB, some local DOT voice crackled through, talking to the crew truck about routine winter inspection, and no anomalies noted. I might have believed I imagined it, except for the way my rig felt. As I passed over that mile marker, the vibration changed. Not a bump, not a rough patch, a rhythm, a slow, deep thump running up through the tires, into the frame, into my bones. Inhale, exhale. The dash lights dimmed, then brightened, like the truck was dipping in and out of someone else's heartbeat. I didn't speed up. I didn't slow down. I just drove, every nerve strung tight, until the sensation faded and the hum of the asphalt went back to normal. That was 2 winters ago. I still run that route sometimes. I've rolled over that stretch in blazing heat, in clear night skies, in light rain. The road always looks fine, perfect even, but if the weather's just cold enough, if the air's just still enough, I can feel it, the tiniest rise and fall under my wheels, the whisper of movement deep below the surface, the faintest tug on the truck, like something big and patient is shifting in its sleep, waiting. We like to think highways are just concrete and tar laid across dead land. I know better now. Some nights, out in the Mojave, the road breathes, and sooner or later I think it's going to want more than snow. I still run winters, but I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. Doesn't matter if they look clean, desperate, armed, harmless. Doesn't matter. If they're standing on the side of a cold highway in the middle of nowhere, I keep my wheels turning. You're about to hear why. I drive a white Kenworth T680 with a mid-roof sleeper, hauling a tanker most weeks. Food grade, nothing explosive, but you treat 65,000 pounds of rolling steel with respect no matter what's inside. That night, I was running empty on the tank, deadheading back after a delivery window overran at a plant outside Santa Rosa. Route 54 is one of those stretches of nothing that only truckers and locals know. Long ribbons of 2-lane blacktop cutting across the high desert, a couple of tiny towns, some ranch roads, and a whole lot of silence in between. I'd rolled it dozens of times. I knew which mile markers had busted reflectors, which curves caught the wind wrong. It was late, a little after 1 in the morning. January. A cold system had blown through that afternoon and never really left. The dash read -10 degrees Celsius and dropping, and a dusting of dry snow had turned the shoulders white and the sagebrush into hunched, ghostly shapes. The sky was that low, colorless gray you get when the clouds sit right on top of you. No moon, no stars. Just my headlights reaching maybe a couple 100 feet ahead, catching snowflakes spinning in the beams like sparks. Inside the cab, the heater was set low so I wouldn't get drowsy. The air smelled like old coffee, vinyl, and a faint chemical tang from the sanitizer I use after unloading. The radio was just a murmur in the background. CB was quiet. No one else seemed dumb enough to be out there that late on that road. I just passed a faded green sign. Next service is 42 miles. When I saw him, he was standing on the right shoulder, just beyond the reach of my low beams at first. I thought he was a fence post or a mile marker until I got closer and the shape resolved into a person. A man. Mid-30s, maybe. Hard to tell under the snow. He was standing perfectly still at the edge of the asphalt. Not in the lane, not waving, not walking. Just planted there, feet shoulder-width apart, arms at his sides. His clothes were wrong for the weather. Dark jacket, not thick enough for that kind of cold. Jeans. No hat. No gloves. Snow had collected on his shoulders, on the top of his head, dusting his hair white. It lay there undisturbed, like he'd been out there long enough to be part of the landscape. As my lights washed over him, he didn't lift his arms, didn't step closer, didn't stick out a thumb. He just stared at me. I couldn't see much detail at first. Just a pale face and dark eyes following the truck as I approached. But there was something about the way he held himself, too straight, too still, that put a knot in my gut. I eased off the throttle out of instinct. That's what you do when you see someone on the side of the road at that hour, especially in winter. You slow down, you assess, are they hurt, are they drunk, are they a problem? The tires whispered over a patch of sleet. The tank behind me hummed hollow and light. As I drew level with him, I got a clearer look. His face was the first thing that told me to keep going. It was blank. Not calm, not afraid, not relieved to see headlights in the night. Just empty. His eyes tracked the cab with this flat, heavy focus, like he was memorizing me. The snow on his shoulders didn't melt. No steam from his breath. No puff of white in the air. He didn't turn his head fully as I passed. His eyes did, sliding in their sockets to follow the glass. The rest of him stayed locked, a mannequin dipped in frost. I rolled by doing maybe 45. In the mirror, I watched him recede into the dark. A lone figure on a white shoulder, swallowed by moving snow. There are these little moments on the road where you make decisions you don't even realize are big until later. All I did was keep my foot on the pedal and roll on. I told myself I'd call it in at the next town. Let a trooper check on him. I even reached toward the radio once, then pulled my hand back to grab the wheel when a gust pushed the trailer sideways. The next mile was just wind and white noise. Wipers squeaking, heater humming, the Kenworth's low drone keeping me company. Then the trailer cam flickered. I've got a small monitor mounted just above the center console, hooked to a camera aimed back down the line of the rig. It's mainly for tight spots, backing, checks at night when I don't feel like climbing out. That night, the screen had been nothing but the faint glow of my own taillights staining the snow. In my peripheral vision, I saw motion. I glanced down for half a second. Somebody was walking behind the truck. At first, my mind rejected it. The image didn't fit. The camera showed the empty strip of highway behind my trailer, the ghostly gleam of the centerline, the snow blowing across the pavement, and a figure, centered in the lane, keeping perfect pace. Same man, same clothes, dark jacket, snow on the shoulders. Same posture, straight, arms at his sides. Only now he was walking dead center behind the tanker. I hadn't stopped. I hadn't slowed below 40. There was no way he could be there. My throat went dry. I stared at the monitor too long, felt the truck drift, and jerked my eyes back up to the windshield. The white line wavered under the left headlight. I corrected, tires crunching over a patch of frozen slush. When I looked back down, he was closer. He hadn't moved like a person walking. One frame, he was maybe 30 feet back, small in the view. The next, he filled more of the screen like the camera had zoomed even though I hadn't touched it. His head was tilted up now. Those dark eyes were fixed exactly where the camera lens would be. Like he knew it was there. Snowflakes blew through him, not around him. They vanished as they crossed his outline, like they were being swallowed. I reached for the CB mic with a hand that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Breaker 19, I said, voice tight. Any units on 54? You got your ears on? Nothing. No hiss, no chatter, no bored night voice coming back with a joke. Just a dead, heavy silence in the speaker that made the cab feel smaller. The monitor flickered again. He wasn't behind the trailer anymore. For one heartbeat, the screen showed nothing but swirling white and red taillights. Then, as if a switch flipped, the image changed. He was on the catwalk, right between the cab and the tank, in that narrow metal space where the hoses and lines run. The camera caught him from slightly above, framed between the rounded front of the tanker and the back wall of my sleeper. He was standing sideways, one hand resting lightly on the tank, the other on the cab, like he was feeling the vibration of the truck. And he was staring directly into my rear window. Up close now, his face didn't look blank. It looked wrong. The skin was too smooth, like there were muscles missing under it. His lips were slightly parted, but I still couldn't see any breath. Not even a hint of fog on the glass, though frost was starting to creep along the inside edges of the back window. His eyes were the worst part. They were too glossy, too wet, like he'd been standing in sleet for hours and nothing had frozen in them. No redness, no irritation, just dark, reflective pools that caught the dash lights in faint, warped glints. I felt a physical drop in my stomach, like hitting an unseen dip at 70. The instinct to stop Ward with every training module I'd ever sat through. Human on the catwalk means emergency. You don't keep moving with someone back there. But every part of me that wasn't on autopilot was screaming the opposite. Don't stop. Don't get out. I kept my hands locked on the wheel and did neither. My heart hammered against the seatbelt. The heater suddenly felt like it wasn't doing a thing. The air in the cab grew thin and cold, my breath fogging in front of my face. He didn't move, didn't pound on the window, didn't shout. He just watched me through the glass, head tilted a fraction, like he was curious. I hit the radio for highway patrol. State radio, this is northbound tanker on Route 54. I rattled off the mile marker I'd passed not long ago. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. Possible pedestrian on vehicle. Requesting assistance at next rest area. Static hissed for a beat. Then a calm dispatcher's voice came back. Copy, tanker. Nearest rest is 21 miles ahead. Units notified. Can you confirm the subject's condition? I glanced at the monitor again. He was closer. Not by much. Just a few inches. Enough that his forehead almost touched the rear window now. Enough that I could see the tiny, perfect crystals of snow clinging to his lashes without melting. I can't tell, I said. You don't tell dispatch he's dead but walking. You don't say he doesn't have a shadow. You don't say, I think the snow is going through him. You just keep driving. Those 21 miles felt like 200. The road stretched on and on, a narrow gray artery through an endless white body. Every rise and fall in the pavement translated up through the tires, into the frame, into my spine. The tank hummed hollow and restless behind me. The man on the catwalk never slipped, never swayed, never so much as blinked. I found myself checking the side mirrors more often than the windshield, half expecting to see someone else. Another truck? A trooper? Anything that said I wasn't the only person in that strange, sealed-off world of snow and glass. There was nothing, just the swirling white and my own beams. The rest area finally loomed out of the dark like a ship in fog. A long pull-through lot, a couple of sodium lights buzzing orange, 2 vending machines glowing against a cinder-block restroom building. No other rigs, no cars. But there was a cruiser parked nose out near the exit, idling. State trooper, lights off. I eased off the throttle, started slowing the rig, hazards clicking on. My eyes flicked between the road, the cruiser, and the monitor. He was still there, still watching. As I brought the truck down under 15, something in the cab shifted. The air pressure, the sound, the faint hum of the tires on the road. It all dropped, like stepping into a vacuum. The frost on the inside edges of the rear window thickened in seconds, crawling over the glass in branching patterns. The back of my neck prickled with cold. For the first time since I'd seen him, the man on the catwalk moved. He lifted one hand, slowly, deliberately, and pressed it flat against the rear window. From my seat, I couldn't see fingers, just the shadow of a palm, but the frost underneath his hand melted in a perfect, round patch, an oval of clear glass in a field of white. I pulled into the rest area lane, rolling to a stop where the trooper waved me in. Set the brakes. The truck sighed, air dumping with a long exhale I felt all the way through my boots. The monitor flickered once more. He was gone. Just like that. One frame, pale face at the glass, hand against the frost. Next frame, empty catwalk, snow blowing between cab and tank, metal slick with ice. The trooper climbed up onto the step, rapped on my door. I rolled the window down, breath spilling out in a cloud. "You're the one who called in the hitcher?" he asked. Young guy, tired eyes, hand resting casual on the door. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded hoarse. He was on the back, between the cab and the tank. Whole way from out there. The trooper frowned, more at my tone than my words. "Stay put a sec," he said. "We'll take a look." Two of them went over the truck. Flashlights under the tank, along the frame, up the ladder. Checked the catwalk, the hoses, the lines. One of them shined his light straight through the rear window, making me squint. When he came back, his boots left clean, distinct prints in the snow. I watched them appear in the glow of my side light. "No one's back there," he said. "No sign anyone was." He jerked his chin toward the lot. "No footprints on your paths either. Just ours and yours. You sure you weren't seeing shadows? Snow can play tricks on you in these storms." I didn't argue. I didn't know how to. He told me to rest if I needed it, to watch for ice on the next grade, went back to his cruiser. I sat there for a minute after they pulled out, engine still running, hands still on the wheel. The cab felt smaller than it had on the road, like the darkness outside was pressed right up against the glass. When I finally twisted around to look at the rear window, my stomach dropped. The frost was back, thick and even across the whole pane, except for one spot, right in the center, where his hand had been. The frost was thinner, smeared, like someone had wiped at it from the inside with two warm fingers. 3 words were traced there in a clear line, letters formed by a fingertip dragging through the white. "Why didn't you stop?" The writing was on the inside. I didn't sleep in that rest area. I drove until sunrise, until the snow turned to wet slush and the sky went pale and empty. When I finally parked at a real truck stop with other rigs nose to tail and diesel fumes thick in the air, the words were gone. The glass was just glass again. I've looked for that man since. Not on purpose at first. Just scanning the shoulders in winter, checking the cameras a little more often than I used to. Then later, with a kind of dread curiosity. Different highways, different states. It doesn't matter. Sometimes on cold nights, I'll catch a shape in the corner of my eye on the monitor. A smear that looks too much like someone walking behind the rig. Every time my gut locks up. And every time I remember snow on shoulders, eyes too focused, and words traced in frost from my side of the glass. People ask me now why I don't stop for hitchhikers in winter, why I call things in instead of pulling over like I used to. The answer's simple. I think I already picked one up once, and I think he's still looking for a ride. I've run enough miles to know what CB static sounds like. Real static is boring. It's just there like a fan in the background. After a few hours, you stop hearing it. What I heard that night on Channel 13 wasn't static. I drive a 2018 Peterbilt 579, white cab, mid-roof sleeper, mostly hauling food-grade loads on a dedicated run between California and New Mexico. That night, I was eastbound out of Barstow, pushing across the desert on a December run with an empty trailer behind me, light and a little too eager to dance on the ice. It was just after midnight, the kind of cold that makes the desert feel less like sand and more like glass. The dash said -7 degrees Celsius when I checked it, and the little outside temp indicator was dropping 1 notch at a time. The sky was clouded over. No stars, no moon, just a low, solid ceiling of dark. Snow was coming down in needle-thin flakes, not heavy enough to blanket anything, just enough to dust the shoulders and whirl across the asphalt like ash. The road was a 2-lane ribbon through black nothing. I had the cruise set a touch under the limit, both hands on the wheel. Headlights cut a clean cone through the dark, catching the faint shine of the dashed white centerline, the retroreflectors on the posts, and the occasional scrub bush off to the side. CB was quiet on 19. Most guys had either parked up or were running silent. All I got was a soft hiss and the occasional distant carrier click that never turned into words. I flipped the radio down to scan mode just to have something to listen to. The display cycled through the channels, pausing here and there when it hit faint signals, mostly noise. When it hit 13, it stopped. Channel 13's a dead channel out here. Nobody I know uses it. It's not a trucker channel, not a local favorite, just one of those numbers that sits empty on the dial. The first sound that came through could have been wind over a mic. A low, uneven rush, like someone was holding a handset out a cracked window. I frowned, turned the volume up just a hair. The rush turned into something else. At first, I thought it was my imagination filling in gaps. Pareidolia for the ears. White noise can sound like anything if you listen long enough. But once you hear something that sounds like words, you can't unhear it. Under the static, I heard crying. Not loud sobs, not hysterical. Just this broken, breathy sound. Like someone who'd already screamed themselves hoarse and was out of volume. Stuck in that quieter place past panic. I watched the signal meter. 3 green bars. 4. Then it dropped back to 1, climbed again like the source was somewhere out there, fading in and out with the terrain. I reached up and tapped the channel button once, twice. The display stayed on 13. I sighed, thumbed the transmit key. Channel 13, you got your ears on? You're bleeding into my scan. Nothing. Just that ragged breathing and the occasional crackling pop. I was about to flip the whole unit off when something under the static sharpened. A few syllables rose up out of the mush, like a voice finally getting its mouth above water. Leave me here. It was faint. Female, I thought at first. Or maybe just shredded, sandpapered down by smoke and time. The words stretched, distorted by the interference. Don't leave me here. The hair on my forearms stood up under my jacket. The heater hummed low, doing its best to keep the chill off the glass. I told myself it was a prank. Some bored kid with a handheld. Someone on a base station who figured they'd mess around on a dead channel. I'd pulled that kind of stunt on the ham bands when I was a teenager. A good radio can make you sound like you're coming from the middle of nowhere. The thing was, my unit has a basic signal direction display. Nothing fancy, just a little coordinate guess using GPS and signal strength when the source is close. I glanced at it. The coordinates it spat out weren't on the highway. They were out in the desert, a couple miles off the road. No marked routes, no service roads, just empty BLM land and rocks. The voice dragged through the speaker again. Don't leave me. I forced my eyes back to the lane, not the display. The snow had started to stick more, turning the edges of the road into a slushy smear. The trailer felt lighter than ever, twitching a little whenever the wind shifted. About 10 minutes later, the GPS pinged me to a junction. My route doglegged onto a smaller highway that cut closer to where those phantom coordinates said the signal was coming from. As I eased into the turn, the signal bars on the CB climbed. Static got louder. The crying resolved into something more like a person. I could hear rough breaths now, wet and ragged, like each inhale hurt. Don't leave me here, the voice said. This time it was clear, raw, torn, right in my ear. I swallowed hard. Channel 13, state your position, I said, keeping my voice level. You in a vehicle? You injured? For a moment, all I got was a rush of noise, like the whole desert was exhaling through my radio. Then, it's dark. The way they said it hit me harder than if they'd screamed. My eyes flicked to the coordinates again. The little estimate marker was almost on top of my truck icon now. Maybe a quarter-mile offset to the right. No road out there, just a faint fence line and scrub. My headlights caught something up ahead before my brain registered what it was. First I saw the reflection, white glare off twisted metal. Then the shape. A burned-out semi lay on its side in the desert, maybe 50 yards off the highway. The cab was crushed. The trailer half melted into itself. No color left on anything, just shades of black and gray and rust, like an old photograph left in a fire. The snow between the road and the wreck was wrong. Everywhere else, it lay in a thin, clean sheet over the sand and brush. But in a wide circle around that semi, maybe 20 yards across, the snow had melted into black slush. It looked wet, fresh. Steam clung low to the ground, swirling in my headlights even though the outside temp on the dash read -9 degrees Celsius. The CB hissed, then shrieked. "Don't leave me here." The voice hit the cab like a physical blow. I flinched, the wheel twitching in my hands. The trailer wobbled, hinting at a slide, then straightened. I started to slow. Training, instinct, whatever you want to call it, it's hardwired. You see a wreck, you slow down. You assess. Maybe there's someone alive. Maybe there's something you can do. My foot eased toward the brake. That's when a hand hit my side window. I didn't see it coming. 1 second the glass was just dark, flecked with snow. The next, there was a palm pressed flat against it, right by my face. I jerked away so hard my shoulder hit the back of the seat. The handprint was perfect. 5 fingers, long, pressed out hard enough that the outline warped with the curve of the glass. It wasn't a fog mark. It wasn't just moisture. It was black, like someone had dipped their hand in soot and blood and slammed it against the window. The streaks were thick, opaque, running in rivulets toward the bottom of the frame. Tiny flecks of something dark and crusted flaked down onto the door panel. For half a heartbeat, I thought I saw skin through the glass. Charred, blistered, slick with something that wasn't water. The suggestion of bone under it where the palm pressed hardest. There was no way anyone could be there. I was doing 45 miles an hour on an open stretch of highway. No one had been on the shoulder. I hadn't heard footsteps on the step, no tug on the door, but the handprint stayed, fingers twitching in my mind even though they were perfectly still. The CB went insane. The static ramped up into a howl, every frequency hitting at once. Under it all, punching through, was that voice. "Pull over," it begged. "Please, please, don't leave me here. It's hot. It's burning. I can't." The words dissolved into a scream that wasn't human by the end. Not because it was monstrous, but because it was too raw. All edges, no center. A sound stripped down past language. My eyes wanted to lock on that print. On the way, the black goop at the fingertips smeared as if something were trying to dig in. But the part of my brain that still knew what 60,000 pounds of truck could do if I lost focus forced me to stare at the road. I did the only thing that felt remotely sane. I kept driving. I eased my foot off the brake, rolled back into the throttle. The semi-skeleton out in the desert slid out of my peripheral vision, swallowed by blown snow and distance. The melted ring of slush around it cast a dark, wet shadow that seemed to hang in the air for a moment before disappearing. The handprint stayed on the glass. It lingered there as the CB crackled and popped, the voice shifting from begging to keening to a kind of whispering that crawled along my spine. I heard fragments. "Don't leave," "too dark," "smoke," all jumbled together like a recording stuck between play and rewind. A mile down the road, the signal meter on the CB dropped. For bars. 3, 2. The cries thinned out, turned back into wind noises and snatches of nothing. By the time the marker ticked over to the next mile, Channel 13 was silent. No static, no voice, just the faint hum of the radio's electronics. I risked a glance at the window. The handprint was gone. Not faded, gone. The glass was clean, wiped of black, frost starting to feather along the edges again as if nothing had ever been there. But the smell didn't leave. It rolled through the cab in a slow wave, cutting through diesel and coffee and the faint soap scent from the last wash. It was thick and greasy, clinging to the back of my throat. Burned meat and plastic and hair, the kind of stink you only encounter once in person and never forget. I drove the rest of that night with the window cracked, outside air knifing in, heater fighting to keep my hands from going numb. It didn't help. No matter how much air I pulled through, the smell clung to the upholstery, to my clothes, to my skin. When I finally made it to a real truck stop at dawn, I parked and just sat there for a minute, fingers still curled around the wheel, CB dark and silent. Inside, I asked around. One old-timer at the counter looked up when I mentioned the burned-out semi off that route. He stirred his coffee for a long time before answering. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Tanker went up out there, 7-8 years back. Load shifted, they said, or the driver dozed and rolled it. Fuel lit up the whole damn world. Folks in the nearest town saw the fire from 20 miles away. "Driver?" I asked. He shook his head once. "Never found all of him. Some say they didn't find anything. Just burned steel and glass. Coroner called it consumed." He took a sip, eyes distant. "Company used to run Channel 13. Their internal thing. Old habit." Later that week, off-duty, I called Highway Patrol just to check. Gave them the mile marker, the rough coordinates. Asked if there'd been any recent wrecks. The dispatcher pulled the file. Confirmed the explosion. Confirmed it was 7 years to the month. Confirmed the official line. No recoverable remains. No recent accidents. Nobody out there now. They had nothing to say about CB calls. That smell stayed in my cab for 3 days. I scrubbed the interior, wiped down the glass, changed the cabin filter. Still caught whiffs of it in the seams of the seatbelt, in the air vents. It finally faded, but I've never been able to convince myself it really left. Because every December, when I roll that stretch again, something happens. Not every time. Not always at the exact mile marker. But close. The CB will crackle, just once, when the GPS says I'm near that burned patch of desert. Channel 13 lights up on the display, even if I've locked it out. Static hisses in my ear. And under it, if I let myself listen, I can still hear a voice asking me not to leave them there. I don't answer. I don't key up. I don't even look at the window. I just keep my wheels turning and try not to breathe too deep. Because some wrecks get cleaned up. Some fires burn out. Some names get carved into stone and filed away. But out there, under a thin skin of snow and sand, I think one driver is still stuck in the last call they ever made. And Channel 13 is the only line they have left. I've driven through enough winters to know what cold feels like. The night I'm about to tell you about, the cold wasn't the worst part. I drive a 2017 Volvo VNL white mid-roof sleeper, usually pulling a 53-foot dry van on a regional run through the mountain states. That week I was hauling packaged food out of Denver, cutting north and then west through some back highways to avoid an incoming ice storm on the main interstates. It was December, one of those winters where the weather feels personal. My dispatch window had already been blown once by road closures, so I was trying to make up some time, without doing anything stupid enough to put 40,000 pounds of customer freight in a ditch. I'd been rolling in and out of light snow all evening. By the time it was past midnight, I was on a 2-lane state highway that wound through low hills and open country. No town lights on the horizon, no farmhouses, just reflectors on posts and the occasional silhouette of a bare tree against a sky that looked like wet slate. Inside the cab, it was that familiar, claustrophobic kind of cozy. Heater on low, dash lights dimmed, wipers thudding back and forth on the slow setting, smearing frozen dust off the glass. Coffee smell from the thermos in the cup holder, mingling with diesel and that baked plastic scent of a truck that's seen serious miles. Outside, the temperature kept dropping. I watched it fall on the dash. 16 degrees C, 18 degrees C, 20 degrees C. The snow on the shoulders had crusted into hard, rippled drifts, like frozen surf. My headlights painted the road in matte black, lines faint and half-covered. The world outside reduced to a cone of dirty white and gray. CB was quiet, too late for chatter, too far from any major route for company. There's a particular kind of silence you get in a truck at night when the radio's off, and it's just your engine, your tires, and the wind. It's not real silence, it's all hum and vibration, but it feels like it, like you're sealed in your own little capsule, cutting through the dark while the rest of the world sleeps. I was in that headspace, watching the faint glow of the next mile marker coming up, when I noticed something that didn't make sense. The first sign wasn't visual. It was the sound. The roar under the tires changed. On ice and packed snow, you get this high, sandpaper hiss almost like white noise. It had been steady for hours, but as I rolled over a small rise, that hiss dropped away and turned into a deeper, smoother hum, like I'd suddenly hit fresh, dry pavement in the middle of a storm. The temperature on the dash read -22 degrees Celsius. My eyes went straight to the road, about 100 feet ahead. Right there in my lane, the asphalt was wrong. Everything around it, shoulders, ditches, the opposite lane, was covered in frozen snow and patches of ice. But for a stretch maybe 50 feet long, the highway itself was bare. No snow, no frost, clean, black asphalt, slightly slick looking like it had just been washed. And it was steaming. Thin, white vapor rose from the surface in slow curls, drifting up into the headlights. It looked exactly like the fog that rolls off a hot spring on a cold morning. The snow at the edges of that patch slumped and retreated, melting into dark, wet slush that bled away from the center line. I eased off the throttle without even thinking about it. You see something like that, you don't just roll over it at full speed. Could have been a warm groundwater seep. Could have been some kind of underground pipe or runoff. Could have been nothing more than a weird visual trick where the pavement was just darker, holding heat a little better than the rest. That's what I told myself. But the closer I got, the less that explanation fit. The hot stretch wasn't random. It was too clean. A sharp transition from frozen to bare and back to frozen again, like someone had turned a giant blowtorch on that exact section and nowhere else. My headlights hit it straight on. For a second, the asphalt looked almost red. Not bright, not glowing like a forge. Just this faint, ember-colored sheen deep under the black. The way coals look when you think the fire's out and then poke them. The temp gauge on the dash held steady at minus 22 degrees Celsius. My truck's tires rolled up onto the beginning of the dry patch. The sound changed again, no crunch, no crumble, just a smooth hum and a faint hiss, like I was driving over something just a few degrees shy of boiling. My palms were slick on the wheel. Every manual, every bit of training, every damn instinct I had was screaming the same thing. This isn't right. I brought the truck down to a crawl, then finally to a stop, right on the far side of that warm strip. Idling. Hazards clicking. The reflection of my own flashers pulsed on the pavement in the mirror. Orange strobe on black that looked almost oily. I don't know why I got out. Truckers do a lot of stupid things in the name of curiosity, and stepping out of a perfectly good cab into minus 22 degrees air to stand on a piece of road that felt like it shouldn't exist is right at the top of that list. But I set the brakes, felt the truck settle, air dumping with that long sigh. I grabbed my jacket, zipped it up to my throat, jammed a beanie on my head, and stepped down onto the step, boots hitting metal with a hollow clunk. The cold hit my face like a slap the second I opened the door. It was the kind of cold that makes the inside of your nose go numb. My breath came out in thick clouds, immediately shredded by the wind. Except when I stepped off the bottom step and onto that patch of road, it was like walking into a different season. The air was still freezing around my head and hands. My ears burned, but under my boots, the asphalt radiated heat. Came up through the soles like I was standing on the hood of a truck that had just pulled off a steep grade. The snow at the edges of the patch wasn't just melted. It was actively receding, droplets of water sizzling silently against the hot blacktop. Steam curled around my ankles, ghosting up from hairline cracks in the pavement. Carried a smell with it, sharp, mineral, metallic. Underneath that, something else. Faint but there. Burnt hair. I swallowed, tongue suddenly thick. The Volvo idled a few yards away, engine rattling softly. My hazards ticked a steady rhythm, little orange strobes flashing against the darkness. Beyond that 50-foot glow, the world went back to frozen. Hard snow, pale sky, scrub trees rattling in the wind. Right where I stood, it might as well have been a manhole cover over a furnace. I squatted down, gloved hand hovering just above the asphalt. The heat coming off it was strong enough that my skin prickled through the leather. The road trembled. At first, I thought it was a gust hitting the truck, some vibration traveling through the frame into the ground. But the Volvo's engine note didn't change. The wind stayed the same. The tremor came again, stronger. A low vibration ran up through my feet, into my ankles, up my legs. The asphalt shuddered, not buckling, not cracking. Just this deep, slow flex, like muscle under skin. From somewhere below, a sound rose. Not loud, not immediate. It started as a faint, drawn-out groan, like distant thunder muffled by miles of rock. The kind of noise you feel in your teeth more than you hear. The steam at the edges thickened. Snow surrounding the warm patch flared outward, flung from the border as if something below was exhaling. The hot air hit my face, carrying that smell full force this time. Burnt hair, burnt plastic, burnt meat. That smell of a fire that's not just wood and trash. The kind of smell you pray you never have to recognize on a real scene. I started backing up, slow at first, one step, another, keeping my eyes on the pavement. The groan climbed in pitch. The tremor turned into a definite shake now, pebbles jittering on the surface, tiny lines of asphalt dust hopping like they were on a subwoofer. Then the road split. No dramatic explosion, no geyser of lava. Just a sudden, sharp tear right along the center line, running down the middle of that hot patch. The crack opened in a jagged black vein, wide enough to see into but too dark to make anything out. Steam blasted out of it in a thick column, hitting the freezing air and billowing outward in a mushroom of white. The blast of heat that rolled over me was like standing in front of an open oven turned up full. It shoved me backward, hot wind hitting my chest. My eyes watered. The top layer of snow on the surrounding drifts melted in an instant, collapsing into dark, wet paste. I stumbled, boots sliding on wet asphalt, almost going down. My hand shot out and caught the side step of the truck, fingers clamping on cold metal. That's when I heard them. Voices. Not one, not two, dozens. They came up from the crack, tangled in the roar of steam and the low rumble of whatever was moving down there. Muffled, distorted, like they were shouting up through feet of packed earth and asphalt. But they were there, distinct, human. Some screamed, high, ragged, desperate. Some shouted words I couldn't make out, layered over each other until it was just a garbled mass of syllables. Underneath them all, a chorus of gasping, choking breaths, like a crowd trying to drag air into smoke-filled lungs. The worst were the ones that weren't screaming. Every so often, under the chaos, a single, hoarse voice would cut through. Just one word. To help. Please. Don't. I couldn't tell if they were angry or begging or both. All I knew was that the sound of them pinned my spine to ice. The air around me shimmered with heat. My cheeks stung, eyes watering, even as the skin on the back of my neck burned cold under the winter wind. My brain did the stupid, split-second calculation people do when they see something they shouldn't. Maybe it's a gas line. Maybe it's a sewer vent. Maybe it's my mind filling in random noise. Then one of the voices screamed, "Let us out!" Clear, right in my ear, like they'd put their mouth to the crack and shouted straight at me. I moved. I don't remember making a conscious decision. One second I was frozen to the step. The next I was hauling myself up into the cab, lungs burning, eyes tearing, boots slipping on wet metal. I slammed the door hard enough to rattle the whole frame. The sound of the steam and the voices cut down to a muffled roar, like a storm heard through thick walls. Inside the cab, the heater felt weak, like I'd brought the cold in with me. My breath fogged the windshield, then cleared, fogged, then cleared. The smell didn't stay outside. Poured in with me. Burnt hair, burnt rubber, burnt something else. It clung to the upholstery, to my clothes, to the very air. My hands shook on the wheel. I dropped the parking brake, slapped the shifter, and rolled back onto the frozen part of the highway, tires splashing through thin streams of meltwater that were already starting to glaze over. As soon as I cleared the far edge of that hot strip, the warmth vanished. The tire noise snapped back to that high, icy hiss. The outside temp on the dash was still pinned at -22 degrees Celsius. My side mirrors showed the plume of steam pouring up from the crack, lit in my taillights like a ghostly pillar. As I picked up speed, I watched it in the mirror. The voices followed. They weren't coming through the CB. The radio was off, dial dead, no power to the speaker. But over the hum of the tires, over the engine, over my own heartbeat, I could hear them. A faint, trailing chorus, growing thinner as I pulled away. "Don't leave. Not done. Let us out." I eased into the throttle, afraid to go too fast on the frozen road and more afraid to go too slow and give that thing under the asphalt any more time to notice me. After a minute, the steam column in the mirror shrank, then faded into the dark. The voices went with it, thinning to a low, far-off moan and then nothing. But the smell stayed. I drove another 50 miles into the next town, a little cluster of lights and buildings that barely deserved the name. Pulled into the one open truck stop they had. Idled down. Set the brakes. The moment I killed the engine, the smell hit harder. No wind noise. No engine to cover it. Just me in a dead silent cab with the stink of burnt organic clinging to everything. I stepped out, boots hitting snow that squeaked with real, honest cold. The air in the lot was clean, diesel fumes, cigarette smoke by the door, the faint grease scent of the fryers inside. The reek was coming from my truck. Or from me. Inside the little diner, the few locals at the counter and 2 other drivers turned when I walked in. Not staring, just that automatic new-face glance you get in small towns. I ordered coffee mainly so I'd have an excuse to stand somewhere warm and bright. The waitress set the cup down, gave me a second look. "You okay, Han?" she asked. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Just a bad patch of road," I said. One of the older guys at the counter snorted softly. "Only one?" he asked without turning. I hesitated, then took the bait. "Southbound," I said. Gave the route number. About 50-60 clicks back. Road was hot, like a sauna, cracked open on me. That made him turn. His face was creased, red from years of wind and sun, eyes a washed-out blue that had seen more winters than I'd been alive. He looked at me a long moment, like he was checking whether I was messing with him. "Steam?" he asked. "Yeah." "Voices?" My fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "Yeah," I said quietly. He sighed through his nose, looked down into his soup. "Bus line used to run that stretch," he said. "Tourist route. Ski folks, hikers, leaf peepers, whatever the season was. Winter of 96-97, somewhere in there, one of them disappeared in a storm. Left the last town up the road. Never made it to the next one." "Wreck?" I asked. "Not officially." He tapped his spoon against the bowl. "Road was closed for 3 days from snow. When they finally plowed it, no sign of a crash. No debris, no bodies. Just a stretch of old asphalt and fresh drifts." He glanced up at me. 42 souls on that bus. Driver, guide, whole load of tourists. Never showed up. Families got some settlement eventually, but there was nothing to bury. The waitress chimed in without looking away from the plates she was stacking. "They say some winters the road sweats," she said. "Gets warm in one spot. Like tonight. Snow doesn't stick. Cows won't cross it." The old man nodded. "Couple of plow boys in town swear they saw taillights under the ice once. Red glow, way down deep, like a train in a tunnel." He shrugged one shoulder. "State says it's geothermal. Old pipes. Bad memories. Whatever fits the paperwork." He held my gaze. "That what you think it is?" I didn't answer. What was I supposed to say? That I'd heard people screaming under my feet? That the hot air had carried the smell of cooked hair into my clothes? That for a minute, standing on that strip of road, I felt like their hands were right under the surface, pushing up, trying to reach mine? I finished my coffee, ordered another one to go. Back in the cab, I cranked the windows, let the freezing wind tear through the interior for 10 minutes while the heater fought back. Didn't matter. That night, when I finally shut down in a proper lot hours away, crawled into the bunk and stretched out, the smell was still there. Fainter now, mixed with the usual truck odors, but still there. And as I lay there in the dark, engine ticking as it cooled, the memory of that heat under my boots wouldn't leave. I've run that route every winter since. Sometimes the road is just a road, frozen, ugly, dangerous in the usual ways. Sometimes the only warm thing out there is the coffee in my thermos. But every once in a while, usually when the temp drops past 20 below and the wind dies down, my headlights will catch a patch of steaming black in the distance. I don't stop anymore. I don't get out. I ease over to the far side of the lane, keep my wheels moving, and pretend I don't hear anything under the hum of the tires. Because whatever's under that asphalt had 30 years to get used to being trapped. And I'm not interested in finding out what happens the night it finally breaks through. I've been through enough inspections to know when something feels off. You learn the rhythm of it over the years. Slow down, roll across the scale, nod at the glass, hand over what they ask for. Pray they don't decide to tear your whole life apart over a missing staple. That night, the rhythm broke. I drive a 2016 Kenworth T680, white cab, 72-inch sleeper, pulling a 53-foot dry van most weeks. That week, I was hauling paper products out of the Pacific Northwest, dropping down through the mountains toward Utah. Nothing hazmat, nothing overweight, just big rolls strapped and sealed in the box. It was late January, the kind of winter where the air feels thin and brittle, like you could snap it if you breathe too hard. I've been running in and out of snow bands all evening, the kind that don't look bad until you realize the world beyond your headlights has completely vanished. By the time I hit the state line, it was a little after 2 in the morning. The sky was a low, solid gray slab. Snow came down in fine, steady sheets, not enough to bury you, just enough to turn every surface into a smear of white and every shoulder into a guess. The outside temp on the dash read -15 degrees Celsius and sliding slowly lower. I had the Kenworth's heater set just high enough to keep the glass clear. The cab smelled like stale coffee, damp wool from my jacket, and that ever-present mix of dust and diesel that seeps into everything you own if you've been driving long enough. CB was mostly dead. A little static, the occasional distant voice that never came in clear enough to understand. Most of the other rigs had parked it hours ago. Dispatch was quiet, just me and the road. Up ahead, through the snow, I caught the faint rectangular glow of a sign. Way station 1 mile, all trucks next right. I swore under my breath, not loud, just a reflex. I was legal on weight, my logs were clean, my pre-trip had been solid. It wasn't that I had anything to hide. I just didn't feel like dealing with cold concrete and fluorescent lights at that hour. But you don't blow past a scale house when they tell you to roll in. Not unless you want trouble. The exit lane for the station came up out of the white, faint lines, a reflective arrow, a shallow curve off the main highway. I put on my signal out of habit, eased onto the ramp, and felt that familiar little weight settle in my chest. The access road rose slightly, then curled toward the way complex. I'd never used this particular station before, but they all looked the same after a while. Big concrete pad for the scale, low flat building, a booth with glass windows, maybe a sign telling you if they're open or closed. Only this one looked wrong. First, I thought it was just the snow. Drifts had piled up high on either side of the little road, eating the guardrails, swallowing the posts. When my headlights swept across the building, the roofline appeared under a thick, uneven blanket of snow, the edges hanging over like icing on a cake. The windows were frosted over from the outside, not just fogged, opaque white, as if someone had packed snow against the glass and let it freeze. No light leaked out from behind them. The booth itself sat just off the side of the scale, a narrow rectangle of glass and metal perched atop a concrete island. Snow was stacked high against its base. The small overhang above the side window sagged under the weight. The place looked abandoned, dead, like no one had set foot in it for years. But the sign over the entrance lane still glowed a faint green through the blowing snow. Open, all trucks. I rolled onto the approach, tires crunching over the frozen crust. The scale platform up ahead was mostly cleared, a flat dark rectangle between the snowbanks. The indicator sign next to it blinked way in dull amber, each word half obscured by frost. As the nose of my truck hit the edge of the platform, something changed. The little light inside the booth flicked on. It was a yellowish glow, weak and slightly flickery, like an old fluorescent tube humming to life. It illuminated the frost from behind, turning the windows into pale, glowing tombstones. I eased the truck forward until my steer tires were centered on the pad. The indicator clicked to a steady hold position. I set the brake, listened to the air dump with that familiar long sigh, heard the faint ticking of cooling metal beneath the engine's rumble. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the side window of the booth slid open with a grinding squeal. A man in an old DOT uniform sat inside. He wore a khaki shirt with shiny buttons, a dark tie knotted too tight, a badge over his left pocket that caught the light in a dull glint. A faded patch clung to his shoulder, the state logo almost worn away. His hair was neatly parted, cut short around ears that looked a little too pale. He didn't look up at first. His head tilted down toward a clipboard, as if he were checking something on a form. The booth's overhead light carved deep shadows under his eyes and nose. When he finally did raise his head, his gaze passed over my windshield, then locked on my side window. No nod, no gesture of greeting, just a slow, heavy blink. He slid the window open the rest of the way and lifted a hand. The motion was small, economical, fingers curling toward himself once. A gimme gesture. Logbook. I reached for the binder on the seat beside me, fingers stiff inside my gloves. The heater was on, but it felt like the cab had lost a few degrees when that booth light came on. Up close, his skin looked wrong. It wasn't just pale. It had this grayish-blue undertone, like he'd been out in the cold too long. The veins at his temples were faintly visible, tracing out toward his hairline. I rolled my window down halfway, a blade of freezing air knifed in. The smell that came with it wasn't just snow and exhaust. There was a faint, stale odor, like old paper and long-dried coffee. "Evening, officer," I said, voice fogging out of my mouth. He didn't answer, didn't introduce himself, didn't ask where I was headed, didn't say license and registration. He just kept that hand up, palm facing me, fingers curling once more. I leaned out and handed him the logbook. The moment his fingers touched mine, I flinched. You know how metal feels when you grab it barehanded at 20 below? That instant, biting burn like the cold itself has teeth? That's how his skin felt. Not just cold from standing in a drafty booth. Not he's been holding a soda can cool. His fingers were so cold they burned right through the fabric of my glove. A sharp, needle stab feeling that made my knuckles jerk before I caught myself. He held on for a second longer than he needed to. His grip wasn't strong, but there was no flexibility in it. Like his joints didn't move right. His eyes met mine. They were a washed-out hazel, pupils slightly too small for the dim light. No warmth in them. No real focus either. Felt like he was looking through me, not at me, measuring distance to something behind my head. He slid the logbook from my grasp and shut the window with a hard clack. I watched him through the frost-blurred glass, his shape moving behind the glowing sheet like a shadow in an old TV. He flipped the book open, ran his finger down the pages, line checks, hours, signatures. Nothing unusual there. I was clean. He reached for something on the counter, an old-fashioned rubber stamp with a wooden handle, pressed it into an ink pad, brought it down on the page with a firm thunk. He didn't ask for my license, didn't ask for registration, didn't look at the truck, just stamped the book, closed it, stood, and crossed the cramped booth in 2 steps. The window screeched open again. He held the logbook out toward me without a word. I took it. Our fingers brushed a second time. That same freezing burn knifed into my skin, sharper now that I knew it was coming. I clenched my teeth, forced myself not to yank my hand away like a spooked rookie. He still didn't speak. He stared at me for a heartbeat longer, something heavy and unreadable in his expression. Wasn't anger, wasn't boredom, wasn't anything I could put a name to. Then, without so much as a nod, he slid the window shut. The booth light flickered once. The indicator sign flashed proceed. The scale numbers on the little digital display beside the booth blinked, then reset to zeros. I rolled the window back up, flexed my fingers inside the gloves. The pads of my index and middle fingers on my right hand throbbed with a deep, growing ache, like frostbite setting in too fast. I put the truck in gear, rolled slowly off the scale and back onto the exit lane. In my mirror, the booth light glowed faintly in the swirling snow. As I merged back onto the highway, a glance at the logbook sitting open on the passenger seat caught my eye. The fresh stamp was right there on the last page I'd filled. Inspected 01/14/98 Officer J. Hollis. The numbers hit me first. My breath stuck for a second. I checked the date glowing on my dash. January 14th, 2024. The month and day matched. The year was 26 years off. I told myself it was a misprint. Old stamp, worn digits. Maybe the two hadn't taken ink right. Maybe the pad was old. Maybe I was seeing things in the glow of the dash lights. Still, something about it pressed on my chest. The ache in my fingertips grew worse. A deeper, burning throb now, little needles of pain shooting down into the joints. I drove another 60 miles before I hit the next rail truck stop. A decent-sized place with a convenience store, a couple of fast food options, lights bright enough to feel like morning, even if your body knew better. DOT had a cruiser parked in the far corner of the lot. Officer sitting inside, laptop glow lighting his face. On an impulse I half regretted even as I followed it. I pulled in 2 lanes over, set the brakes, grabbed my logbook, and climbed down. Crunch of snow under my boots, cold biting the tip of my nose. My fingers pulsed inside the gloves, hot and cold all at once. The trooper rolled his window down halfway as I walked up. Older guy, calm face, the kind who's seen every trick and every breakdown. "Everything all right?" he asked. "I think so," I said. "Just came through your way station back there." I gave him the route number and direction. Guy in the booth stamped my logs. Something about it felt off. "Can you take a look?" He angled the window down enough for me to slide the book in. Flipped through it with gloved hands. When he saw the stamp, his brow tightened. "You said which station?" he asked, eyes not leaving the page. I repeated it. He lowered the book, really looking at me now. "You sure?" he asked. "Because that station's been closed a long time." "Looked rough," I admitted. "Snowed in." But the open sign was lit. Booth light was on. Guy in an old uniform, name tag said Hollis. Didn't talk much, but he shook his head slowly. "Way station on that route burned down in '98, he said. "Electrical fire in the office overnight. Took the booth with it. Officer on duty didn't make it out." He tapped the stamp with a gloved finger. Name was Hollis. James Hollis. The snow seemed to grow quieter around us. He flipped the book back and forth a couple of times, lips pressed into a thin line. "You mind if I step out?" he asked. We moved to the hood of my truck, standing under the yellow wash of the lot lights. Our breath streamed into the air in twin funnels. He opened the logbook again, scanning for the mark. His forehead creased. "Where is it?" he murmured. The stamp was gone. The page that had held the fresh, dark rectangle just an hour before was blank except for my own handwriting. Time entries, miles, signatures. No sign of smudged ink. No indent in the paper. Nothing. "I swear it was right there," I said quietly. He studied my face for a long moment, eyes searching. "Not the way you look at a drunk. The way you look at someone standing on the edge of something they can't see." Then his gaze dropped to my hand. "You hurt yourself?" he asked. I followed his look. The tips of my index and middle fingers were a mottled, angry red. The skin puckered and stiff, little white blisters forming at the pads where I'd made contact with that officer's grip. I peeled the glove back farther. The cold of the lot air hit my damaged skin like a slap. The pain spiked, sharp and bright. It wasn't just red. There was a faint bluish cast around the edges, the outline of his fingers, like the print of a hand left in freezer burn. "Frostbite," the trooper said. "Bad start of it, anyway." He glanced back toward the darkness in the direction I'd come from. "You keep that warm. Get it checked when you can." He handed the book back. Didn't tell me I was crazy. Didn't tell me I'd imagined the whole thing. Just said, "Have a safe night," in a tone that sounded like he wasn't sure such a thing was possible out here. Back in my cab, with the door shut and the heater cranked, I sat there for a long minute, just listening to the engine idle and the faint tick of cooling metal. My fingers throbbed in time with my heartbeat. I flipped the logbook open again, front to back, searching every page. No stamps other than the normal ones from the past few weeks. No sign of 1998. No crooked rectangle with the name Hollis under it. But when I closed my eyes, I could still see him, sitting in that snow-buried booth under a flickering light, uniform pressed, hair parted, skin the color of cold wax, hand hovering, waiting for the next logbook to pass through the window, waiting for a date he never got to leave behind. I still run that corridor sometimes. The way station's officially closed. GPS doesn't even flag it as active anymore. The main sign on the highway is blank. The exit ramp half buried in snow most winters. But on certain nights, when the temperature drops and the sky settles low, I'll see a faint green glow through the falling snow where the open sign used to hang. I don't take the ramp anymore. I stay on the main line. Keep my speed steady. Keep my eyes forward. And every time I pass that spot, the tips of my fingers ache like I've just grabbed something too cold to be touched by the living. I've been running desert lanes long enough to know what's real out there and what's just your eyes getting bored. Heat shimmers, dust devils, the way headlights bend on a curve and look like something they're not. But this didn't happen in heat. This happened in winter. I drive a 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, white cab, 72-inch sleeper, pulling a 53-foot box most weeks. That night I was hauling dry goods out of Phoenix, headed north then east on a route I've done so many times I could almost draw it from memory. Mid-January, light load, clear dispatch window. The kind of night that should have been uneventful. The farther north I got, the more the temperature dropped. By the time I was out past the bigger towns and into that nowhere stretch where it's just you, scrub, and rock, the dash read -6 degrees Celsius and falling. Winter in the desert is a strange thing. The heat leaves so fast the world looks like it forgot what color is. Everything turns gray and brown and black. No cicadas. No distant hum of air conditioners. Just wind sliding over rock and occasional sand gritting against the undercarriage. The sky that night was clear and low at the same time. No clouds, but the stars felt close, crowding around the edge of my windshield. The Milky Way was just a faint smear above the highway, but I barely saw it. My world was the cone of my headlights, the green glow of the dash, and the hum of the tires. CB was mostly dead. A couple of guys chatting way off somewhere on 19, but the skip wasn't carrying much. I had it turned down low, just enough static to keep me from drowning in my own thoughts. It was after midnight, that dead hour when even the 24-hour truck stops feel far away and time stretches out between mile markers. I just passed a sign, next service is 53 miles, and done that mental check you do. Fuel good, coffee okay, bladder fine, no reason to stop. Keep rolling. The desert on either side of the highway was a flat, open expanse. Low scrub, scattered rocks, the occasional shallow wash. No houses, no side roads, just empty. I settled in. Hands at 10 and 2. Eyes running the usual pattern, road, mirrors, gauges, side of the road, back to the road. That's when I saw the other truck. At first, it was just a set of headlights off to my left. 2 white points in the dark, way out beyond the shoulder. I figured it was a ranch access road or some small 2-lane that ran roughly parallel for a bit. Happens more than people think. I watched it out of the corner of my eye for a mile or so. The beams held steady, not bouncing like a pickup on dirt, not jerking like someone messing around in a field, just a smooth, constant glide. As my eyes adjusted to it, I realized something was off. The headlights weren't on a road. They were out over open desert. No side lane, no track, just empty land. Scrub, rocks, dips and rises. But those lights were moving perfectly parallel to me, same direction, same speed, like we were sharing an invisible highway only they could see. I leaned forward a bit, trying to peer through my own windshield glare to get a better angle. My low beams swept the shoulder, the edge of the pavement, then ran out into black nothing. Every now and then, a sage bush or juniper flashed in and out of the light. The other truck's beams knifed over the same terrain, cutting across bushes, scraping over rocks, passing over shallow washes as if none of it existed. I turned the radio down the rest of the way, killing the static. You spend enough time alone on dark roads and your brain will start filling the space with all kinds of things. I told myself it was distance. Maybe that truck was actually on a ridge road, something higher up, the angles just making it look like it was on flat ground. Then I caught the reflection off its trailer. It wasn't just a pair of rogue headlights. There was a full rig running out there. Cab lights, marker lights along the trailer. A faint rectangular gleam where my high beams brushed the side of a box. For a moment, I thought I saw company lettering, but it blurred before my brain could make sense of it. Same height as me. Same length. Same pacing. Mirages happen in heat. I'd seen it 1,000 times. Puddles of water that weren't there, whole phantom vehicles that vanished when you got close. But those need hot air, temperature inversions, distortion. Out here, the air leaking past the edge of my driver's window was cold enough to numb my fingers if I held them up too long. I checked the outside temp again. -8 degrees Celsius. The other truck kept pace. If I nudged the throttle a little, the ghost rig on my left nudged ahead. If I eased off, it fell back, always staying just close enough that I could see the glow of its headlights and the faint ghost of its side profile, never so close that my own beams really nailed it. I flipped my CB to 19, thumbed the mic. Westbound en route. I rattled off the number. You boys seeing any construction lights off to the south? I got a truck running parallel off the road, wondering if there's a service road I missed. Silence. Not even a half-interested go ahead. Just dead air and the faint hiss of an empty channel. I tried one more time. Westbound, mile marker. I glanced at the next reflector post when my headlights hit it. 287. Anybody catching those lights off my left? Nothing. I set the mic back in its clip. The skin on the back of my neck had gone tight. That weird, crawling sensation like someone's watching you when you know you're alone. I told myself if I just got a closer look, I'd see what it really was. Some dirt road, a line of off-roaders, a small oil field operation running four ways. Anything. So I sped up, eased the throttle down, felt the engine pull. The tatch climbed a little. The scenery started passing just that bit faster. The other truck accelerated with me. Perfectly. We rolled together through the night, like we were tied with a steel cable. Every rise and dip in the highway, every slight curve, we matched. Its lights bobbed in sync with mine, even though it should have been hitting rocks and sand and scrub that would have had a real rig bucking like a Bronco. The mirrors showed nothing on my actual left. Just empty lane and then the shoulder ghostly in the low beams. Out in the desert, the second truck paced me anyway. I tapped the brakes, just enough to drop 5 miles an hour. Its lights slid back with mine, staying exactly in line. Okay, I muttered to myself. That's enough. I eased my truck a little toward the center line, giving myself more room between me and the shoulder. No reason, just instinct. The second I did, the other truck's headlights shifted. They turned. Not gradually, not with the slow arc of a lane change. They pivoted like a pair of eyes locking onto me. One moment they were shining parallel, casting their beams ahead across the empty desert. The next they were angled directly at my cab, cutting across rock and scrub and frozen sand, burning a path straight toward my side window. I tightened my grip on the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Jesus! The phantom truck left its invisible road and started toward me. No engine noise, no grind of tires on rock. Just those silent, white beams carving through the darkness, growing brighter as they closed the distance. I could see more of it now in my peripheral vision. The faint outline of a cab, a radiator grill that caught my light and threw it back distorted. The side of a trailer, matte and colorless, gliding over boulders and bushes without touching them. My heart rate kicked up, thudding in my ears. The hum of my own tires on the asphalt suddenly felt too loud, too fragile, like the quiet between each rotation was something that could break. I kept my eyes forward. The worst thing you can do when you're spooked is stare at the thing that's spooking you and forget the real road in front of you. The ghost rig came in from my left at an angle that would have put it nose first into my tank if it had been real. I braced. Every muscle from my jaw to my calves went tight. I pictured the impact in detail. The slam, the scream of metal, the cab spinning, the world outside turning into a blender of glass and snow and headlights. I told myself to steer into it, to fight the jackknife, to. The other truck hit me, except it didn't. The instant it reached me, something passed through the cab. The air turned to ice. My windshield fogged over from the inside, not in slow, breathy patches, but all at once. A solid sheet of white blossomed out from the center, racing to the edges so fast I didn't even have time to wipe it. For a second, all I could see of the outside world was the smear of my own headlights glowing behind the frozen glass. The temperature in the cab dropped 20 degrees in a heartbeat. My breath went from faint mist to thick, panicked bursts. The steering wheel under my hands went so cold I felt the burn through my gloves. The Freightliner didn't shudder, didn't jolt. The engine didn't flinch. But my bones did. It felt like something massive and hollow had slid through us, like being inside a bell someone had struck with a hammer made of ice. The CB, which I'd forgotten I'd even left on, exploded into static. Not regular static. Not the hiss you get in dead zones. This was a tearing sound, a snarl of noise that clawed at my eardrums, rising and falling in jagged waves. Under it, something else moved, a shape in the sound like a voice trying to push through. I stabbed at the wiper switch. The blade screeched across the inside of the windshield, not outside, dragging pale streaks in the frost. Useless. Then, just as suddenly as it had turned white, the glass cleared. The frost receded like someone had breathed in, drawing all that ice back into the center of the cab and out again. The road snapped back into view. Centerline. Shoulder. The reflective backsides of a couple of mile marker posts flashing by. My truck was still dead center in the lane. No skid. No drift. The tatch sat where it should. The cruise light still glowed. Out of reflex, I glanced to my left. There was nothing there. No second truck. No lights. No tracks in the desert. Just empty scrub stretching away under a sky that suddenly felt much farther away. The static on the CB cut out mid-scream. Silence punched the cab. Then a voice whispered into it. Wrong route. Those two words came through clean, like they'd been waiting for the noise to die so they could slip between the cracks. The voice was low, tired, scraped raw. Male, somewhere between young and middle-aged. A trucker's voice. The kind you hear at diners at 3 in the morning, talking about weather and loads. It sounded like he was sitting right behind my seat. I snapped my head around, half expecting to see someone crouched in the darkness of the sleeper. Nothing. Just my unmade bunk, a duffel, the faint outline of a jacket hanging on a hook. I turned back to the road, palms slick on the wheel. My chest was tight, like I'd been holding my breath for too long without realizing it. For the next 10 miles, I drove like a brand new student on their first night run. Overly careful, hyper-focused. No more lights appeared in the desert. No more trucks that shouldn't be there. Just the occasional reflective glint of a sign and the pale blur of snow on the shoulder. Eventually, a small town's glow showed up on the horizon. A scattering of lights. Gas station. 2 motels. A diner with a neon sign trying its best to cut through the cold. I pulled into the truck lot of the gas station, set the brakes, and just sat there for a second, listening to the idle and the tick of cooling metal. The smell in the cab wasn't right. It wasn't diesel or coffee or my own sweat. There was a faint, stale odor, like damp fabric that's been sealed up for too long. Under that, a hint of something colder, metal and old plastic, the way an abandoned vehicle smells when you pop the door for the first time in years. I shook it off and went inside. There was another driver at the counter, paying for coffee. Older guy, weathered face, gray in his beard, hands like worn leather. His jacket had a company logo I recognized from the highway, small outfit, mostly regional. We got to talking the way drivers do. Weather, road conditions, how dead it was out there tonight. I mentioned the stretch I'd just come through. When I gave him the highway number and rough mile markers, he went quiet for a second. You see anything weird? He asked. I thought about lying. Then I didn't. Saw another rig, I said. Off the road, running parallel. Then, it wasn't. He watched me over the rim of his cup. Lights crossed the desert? No road for him to be on. Yeah. He nodded once. Not surprised, not amused. Just resigned. Lot of guys say that, he said. Not on hot days. Winter nights. Same area. Used to think they were all smoking the same thing. He took a slow sip. Then I saw it myself. About 5 years ago. What is it? I asked. He shrugged one shoulder. Officially? Nothing. Just mirages, fatigue, whatever helps the safety guy sleep. Unofficially. He set the cup down, eyes drifting past me to the dark glass of the store window. Snowstorm back in '09, he said. Bad one. Closed that highway for a day after. One driver tried to push through. Dispatch was on him, you know how it goes. Whiteout conditions. He got turned around, swerved to avoid something he thought he saw and went off the road. No guardrail. Just dropped into a shallow wash. He folded a napkin slowly, speaking like he'd told the story before and hated doing it every time. Truck didn't roll hard, but it was cold. Real cold. They found him the next afternoon. Tractor half buried in drifted snow. Trailer jackknife it. Batteries dead. Tank half full. He was still belted in the driver's seat. My stomach sank. Frozen? I asked. He nodded. Cab was sealed up tight enough that nobody saw him from the highway. He'd run the engine as long as he could, but once that died, he let the sentence trail off. I thought about the voice on my CB. That low, tired whisper. Wrong route. He was westbound. The older driver added quietly. Same direction you're running. They say he took the wrong turn in the storm. Missed his exit. Kept going, trying to make up time. Wrong route. He'd been telling folks on the radio before they lost him. He crumpled the napkin, then smoothed it again. They pulled his logs later. Last thing he'd written in the margin on a brake line was 54 instead of 22. Wrong route, we'll fix next stop. The hairs on my arms prickled under my sleeves. I finished my coffee, went back out to the truck, sat in the dark cab for a while, engine idling, heater humming, lights off. The stars overhead looked colder than they had before. I flipped the CB back on. Just static. Boring, empty static. I scanned all the way down and back up. No rogue signals. No half-heard cries. Channel 19, 9, even 13. Nothing but hiss. I rolled out again after a while. Still had miles to go before my bunk was anything but theoretical. The highway was just as empty as before, the desert just as black. Every so often, out of habit, my eyes drifted left, searching the horizon for phantom headlights. Sometimes I think I catch a glimmer out there, a pair of lights where there shouldn't be anything, a hint of a shape pacing me just beyond the reach of my beams. Maybe it's just my brain branded by that night. Maybe it's the real world playing tricks. Or maybe there's still a driver out there, running a route he was never supposed to be on, stuck in the last bad decision he ever made, trying to warn the next guy before he makes the same one. I've been running nights long enough to know what fresh snow should look like. Clean, empty, like a reset button on the world. That's not what I saw out there. I drive a 2016 Peterbilt 579 white sleeper, pulling a 53-foot dry van on a regular west-east corridor that cuts across a whole lot of nothing. I've hauled everything from toilet paper to engine parts, but that night the box behind me was full of canned goods. Heavy, low, nice and stable. The kind of load you don't think about once you're rolling. It was late January, somewhere between the Nevada line and central Utah. High desert, high elevation, scrub, low hills, nothing taller than the hood for miles. It had been snowing on and off all afternoon, but by the time midnight rolled around it had settled into a fine, steady fall. The kind that covers everything and doesn't make a sound. The dash read -14 degrees Celsius when I checked it. Outside my windows, the world was white and black. White on the ground and in the air, black where the sky and road cut through it. The shoulders were smooth, rounded mounds where the plows hadn't bothered yet. My headlights showed the falling snow like static, my tires sang that high, constant hiss you only get on cold pavement with a dusting. Inside the cab, the heater hummed low. Wipers thudded back and forth on the slow cycle. The air smelled like coffee from the thermos in my cup holder, a little bit of stale food from the trash bag behind the seat, and that underlying diesel and dust you never quite get rid of. CB was quiet, too late, too remote. Just a soft hiss on 19 that faded into the background. I had both hands at 10 and 2. Eyes doing their normal dance, road, mirrors, gauges, back to the road. My mind was in that half-wired place every night driver knows. Tired but alert. Phone on the dash, screen dark. Playlist ended an hour ago. Just me and the hum. That's when I saw the footprints. They came in from the edge of my low beams, on the right side of the truck. At first I thought I was looking at the usual snowdrift patterns, wind scours, the weird ridges that form when the powder piles and slides. Then my brain caught up. The snow beside the road was untouched, smooth as icing, except for one line. A single trail of prints ran parallel to my rig, maybe 3 feet off the shoulder. Perfectly spaced, deep, each one the same as the last. They didn't wander. They didn't angle toward the road and back. They just ran alongside me in a dead straight march. I frowned and leaned a little closer to the right window, careful not to drift. The Peterbilt kept humming along at about 50, the weight in the box giving me good traction without too much sway. The prints kept pace. Fresh snowfall should have been filling them in, softening the edges. But the edges were razor clean, sharp walls of white around dark impressions, as if they'd been made seconds ago. Every time my beam slid over a set, they looked new. I did a quick mental check. Had I passed anyone? No pedestrians. No broken down cars back behind me. No cross-country skier would be that close to the asphalt, not at that hour. And no one in their right mind walked a mile out here in -14 and falling. I watched them for a long 30 seconds, then another. They didn't stop, didn't fork, didn't fade, just step after step, pacing my wheels like something walking in the dark, just outside the reach of metal and glass. I told myself it was my brain playing tricks. The snow, the angle of the light, the hypnotic repetition of the road. I've stared at shadows long enough to make all kinds of shapes. Then I noticed the stride. They weren't little bird tracks or deer hoof prints. Each step was the length of my forearm, give or take. The space between them was too long for a normal walking man, a little too short for someone running. A steady, reaching pace. I eased off the throttle a hair. The truck dropped 2-3 miles an hour. The hum of the tires changed pitch. The footprints slowed with me. Always just ahead in the beams, always the same distance from the shoulder, like we were tied together with invisible rope. A few seconds later, the reflective back of a mile marker flashed by on my left. Another minute, a green sign. Next service is 46 miles. White letters blurred by falling snow. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was that feeling you get when you see something just wrong enough that you have to prove to yourself it isn't as bad as you think. Either way, I put on my hazard lights and started to slow down. The Peterbilt groused a bit, weight pushing forward, but the road was dry enough under the powder that I didn't feel any slide. I eased her down to a crawl, then to a stop on the wide shoulder, nose pointed straight, trailer tracking true behind me. The footprints stopped too. They ended right at my passenger door, as if whatever had been making them had come to a neat halt beside the cab. I set the brakes. The truck sighed, air dumping out in a long exhale. The hiss of the tires stopped. The snow hitting the windshield suddenly sounded loud. For a moment, I just sat there, fingers still wrapped around the wheel. The cab felt smaller with the engine idling low. The temperature gauge held steady, green in the corner of my eye. My breath fogged faintly in front of my face. I don't like stopping in the middle of nowhere at night. Any driver will tell you the same. But curiosity is a stupid, powerful thing. I grabbed my jacket from the bunk, shrugged into it, zipped it up to my throat, pulled a beanie down over my ears, gloves on, checked the mirrors out of habit. Nothing but my own trailer and the white curve of the shoulder. Then I cracked the door. The cold bit into me before I even lifted the handle all the way. Real desert cold, thin and sharp, nothing to break it. It slid under my collar, into my lungs. I climbed down, boots hitting the packed shoulder with a crunchy thud. Out here, away from the engine, the night felt huge. The sky was a dome full of hard, distant stars. The only light was my own. Headlights casting a long, pale triangle down the road, hazard lights blinking orange against the snow. I stepped around to the passenger side. The footprints were right there. They ran alongside the truck where I'd seen them from the cab. Each one maybe 1.5 feet long, sunk a couple of inches into the powder. They were darker than the surrounding snow, almost wet-looking, as if they'd been pressed down by something heavy. They weren't human. At first I thought they were boot prints that had melted weird. But boots leave wide, rounded impressions with toe curves and heel edges. These were long and narrow, almost like stretched-out feet. And the ends, there were no toes. The front of each print tapered into 5 thin points, like someone had pressed a hand into the snow and then dragged it forward. They weren't rounded like toes under cloth. They were sharp, bone sharp. I crouched, my knees creaking, glove hovering over one of the impressions. There were lines inside the print. Not treads, not fabric. Striations like the underside of something hard. Like the grooves you see in bones when they're cleaned and dried. The wind picked up for a second, hissing across the open desert, finding every gap in my clothes. I felt it slide past my ears, through the space between truck and trailer. I straightened up, heart rate kicking a little faster than the situation probably called for. The trail ran ahead of me, footstep after footstep, each identical, disappearing into the darkness beyond my headlights. I followed it, just a few feet at first, then 10, then 20. Boots crunched in untouched snow next to that perfect line of alien steps. My own tracks looked messy beside them, shallow and rough. The farther I got from the truck, the louder the world felt. The wind, the faint whine of the idling engine, the tiny sound snow makes as it lands. After maybe 30 yards, the trail stopped. No fading out, no stumble, no drag marks. One step, another, then nothing. The last print was as perfect as the first. Deep, clean edges, bone lines inside, mid-stride. After that, just smooth, untouched snow stretching into the dark. I stood there, staring at the empty stretch where the next step should have been. The hair on the back of my neck lifted. The air shifted. It wasn't a gust exactly, more like a pressure change. The way it feels standing next to a moving train, except there was no sound. The wind around me seemed to divert, as if flowing around an invisible shape. Something rushed past me. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I just felt it. A mass of cold moving fast at chest level, so close it might as well have brushed my jacket. My eyes watered from the sudden sting of air. The snow at my feet jumped, swirling upward in a tight spiral that whipped past my shoulder and then fell dead again. I spun, boots slipping in the powder, heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing. Just my truck, hazard lights blinking, exhaust stretching out in a thin gray plume over the road. The prints behind me lined up neatly along the shoulder. The absence of prints in front of me, an empty canvas. I backed up, one step at a time, forcing myself not to turn and run. When I reached the truck, I grabbed the handle with fingers that had gone numb and hauled myself up into the cab. Slammed the door harder than I meant to. The sound boomed in the enclosed space. My interior dome light flickered. It snapped on when the door shut, then dimmed, brightened, dimmed again, like a bad connection. The glow washed the cab in weak yellow, turning the frost on the inside edges of the glass into glowing veins. For a second, the light went almost out. In that dim half-second, I caught my own reflection in the side window. Pale face, dark beanie, eyes too wide. Behind me, in the sleeper, just darkness. The light steadied, but my stomach didn't. I dropped into the seat, thumbed the brake release, felt the truck settle. My breath sounded too loud. The air inside smelled like cold vinyl and something sharp underneath, like disturbed dust or old stone. I put her in gear. Before I let off the brake, something in my peripheral vision caught me. The mirror, the passenger side convex, angled down toward the shoulder, showed the snow beside my trailer. The hazard lights pulsed orange over the white, making everything look like it was under shallow, dirty water. As I watched, a footprint appeared. The snow dipped, just a little. Then a full impression pressed down, clean and deep, right there in the untouched drift. The long, narrow shape, the bone lines inside. Then another, slightly closer to the truck. Invisible weight walking toward my rig. Step, step, step. The trail that had ended out there in the dark had picked up again, starting from nothing and marching toward my trailer tires, the back of the cab. My skin went cold under layers of fabric. I didn't wait to see how close it got. Foot on the accelerator, slow but firm. The truck rolled forward, tires crunching. The Peterbilt eased back onto the lane, the shoulders sliding away in the mirrors. In that convex glass, the last thing I saw was the newest footprint, right where my steps had been a minute before, slowly filling with wind-blown snow. I drove, didn't touch the radio, didn't look back at the shoulder again. I kept my eyes on the center line and my hands clamped so tight on the wheel my knuckles ached. By the time I hit the next town, the snow had lightened, just a dusting over old drifts. Streetlights threw halos onto the road. Other vehicles appeared. A pickup, another rig, the distant flash of a plow. In the truck stop lot, under humming sodium lamps, I finally let myself breathe normal again. Inside the diner, someone had the local news on low. Some story about hikers gone missing years back, never found. People saying the desert keeps what it wants. I didn't ask. When I went back out, my own tracks from the store to the truck were already half covered, edges softening under new snow. Only one set of footprints looked sharp. Running along the passenger side of my rig, just out of reach of the path I'd made, was a line of long, narrow impressions, exactly like the ones I'd seen out there. They ran parallel to the trailer for maybe 6 steps, then stopped. No leading up to them, no leading away, just 6 prints, pressed deep into the lot snow as if something had walked alongside my truck and vanished. I left that town with the feeling that the desert wasn't as empty as it looked. Fresh snowfall is supposed to erase things. It's supposed to wipe the slate clean. But some nights, out on those frozen stretches, I get the feeling the ground remembers every step that's ever been taken on it. And some of those steps are still being taken. I've hauled just about everything you can legally put in a 53-foot box. Paper, engine blocks, cereal, soda, fireworks. Live chickens once. That was a nightmare. This load was the one that stuck with me. I drive a 2019 Freightliner Cascadia white mid-roof sleeper with a Thermo King reefer hanging off the front of the trailer. That night I was running a sealed load out of Phoenix, up through the Mojave, aiming for Salt Lake City by late morning. Manifest said, frozen medical supplies. Set point on the reefer, minus 18 degrees Celsius. No special hazmat placards, no extra security instructions beyond the usual. Do not break seal. If unit fails, call dispatch immediately. I left Phoenix late in the evening. City lights behind me, desert ahead. It was one of those clear winter nights where the stars look close enough to touch, but the temperature drops fast as soon as the sun's gone. By the time I hit the long empty stretch of I-15 cutting into the Mojave, the outside temp read 0 degrees Celsius and slipping lower. The air was dry, clean, smelling like dust and cold rock whenever I cracked the window. Inside the cab, it was the same as any other night. Heater on low. Dash lights glowing a soft green. Wipers asleep for once. Thermos of coffee wedged in the cup holder. Half gone and old enough to taste a little burnt. The reefer motor thumped along behind me, that familiar cycling growl every few minutes. I checked the in-cab temp readout they'd wired into my dash. Minus 18 degrees steady. No alarms. No blinking codes. CB was quiet. Little hiss on 19, nothing else. Just me, my load, and a black ribbon of highway running through a desert that looked like the surface of the moon. I'd been rolling a couple of hours when I felt it the first time. A dull thump from the trailer. Not a pothole. Not expansion joints. This was from behind. A single, heavy hit against the front wall of the box, right where it hooked to the back of my cab. The kind of impact you feel in the steering wheel and in your spine at the same time. I glanced in the mirrors. Lights on the trailer looked fine. No swaying. No weird lean. Reefer temp still solid. No alarms. I told myself it was the load shifting. Cans settling. Pallets flexing as the trailer bounced over some rough patch I hadn't noticed. Then it came again. Thump. Same spot. Same slow, solid hit. Not violent, not frantic. Just there. I dialed down the music. Not that there was much playing, and listened. Nothing but engine, reefer, wind. A few minutes later, another thump. This one harder. Enough that I could hear the metal respond. A deep, hollow boom that echoed up through the frame. I checked my mirrors again. Nothing. Trailer was tracking like it should. No smoke off the tires. No sparks. The hair on my arms prickled under my jacket. I flipped open the little plastic cover over the dispatch Qualcomm and hit the call button. After a couple of rings, my night dispatcher answered, sounding as bored as ever. "Yeah, unit." He rattled off my number. "What's up? Got a question on this medical load?" I said, keeping my voice calm. "You got anything on the paperwork about movement? Live cargo? Anything like that?" He huffed a short laugh. "Nope. Boxed and sealed by the shipper. Manifest says frozen supplies and specimens." "Why? What's going on?" I stared into the dark, watching the white dashes flick past in my headlights. "Trailer's thumping," I said. "Feels like something's hitting the front wall from the inside." "You take a curve hard?" "Road straight as a ruler. Temp solid. Feels like something is, I don't know, knocking." He went quiet for a second, keyboard keys clacking faint in the background. "Seal is recorded at pickup," he said. "If it breaks before delivery, it's on you and the shipper. Do not open that trailer. If you think it's a mechanical issue, I can route you to the nearest shop. Closest is 90 miles ahead." Another thump. Harder. My seat back shivered against my shoulder blades. He must have heard it through the mic. "That it?" he asked. "Yeah." Like I said, don't open it. You break that seal, it's a whole thing. Keep rolling. If the reefer throws a code, then you stop. Call me if you get alarms. He hung up like that was the end of it. I wanted to believe him. Loads groan. Boxes flex. Pallets settle. It's part of the job. But the hits didn't sound like settling. They sounded like something changing its mind about being where it was. For the next 20 minutes, the thumps came every few miles. Slow. Rhythmic. Always in the same place. Like a fist the size of a dinner plate hitting the front wall of the trailer from inside. Boom. Boom. My hands got tighter on the wheel each time. My eyes flicked to the reefer readout on the dash, so often I was practically driving blind in between. -18 degrees. No alarms. The desert outside was just as it always is. Endless scrub and rock and dry washes, painted silver black in my headlights. No other traffic. Just the faint reflective glint of the next mile marker. Then the next. Then the thumping changed. It sped up. Boom. 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 Like something was losing patience. The hits started to move too. I could feel them, front wall, then farther back, then closer again. Not random. Searching. My heart rate was up now, thudding in my ears louder than the reefer. I coasted onto the shoulder to let a phantom car I wished existed pass me. Habit? I guess. And then pulled back into the lane, trying to focus on the feel of the road instead of the sound behind me. Whatever was in that trailer didn't care. The thumping rattled the box now. I could hear metal squeal in protest. It wasn't enough to throw the truck around, but it made my teeth buzz. Then, somewhere behind me in 30-odd feet of frozen darkness, something screamed. It wasn't a mechanical noise. It wasn't wind. It wasn't any animal I know. It was human, high and ragged, pulled up out of a throat that didn't have much air left. It hit the front wall of the trailer and came through in a muffled shriek that rode right up the back of my neck and lodged at the base of my skull. Everything in me that lives outside of logbooks and manifests and contracts locked onto that sound. I hit the flashers and started easing onto the shoulder. Dispatch's voice in my head shouting about seals and liability suddenly felt a lot quieter than the idea of a person screaming in a box I was dragging through the middle of nowhere. The screaming had stopped. So had the thumping. For a second, the silence was worse. My breath sounded too loud. The heater's fan sounded like it was roaring. The wind outside seemed to press against the cab. I reached down beside the seat and grabbed the bolt cutters I keep in the side box. Long handles. Scarred red grips. They felt heavier than they had at any way station. I killed the stereo, leaving only engine and reefer. Then I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, smelling like dust, old highway, and that sharp, dry Mojave chill that gets into your teeth. My boots hit the gravel with a crunch. The night outside was huge and empty. My own hazards reflected off the white sides of the trailer, strobing the desert in orange pulses. The reefer unit ticked and hummed. A faint rattle in the casing shifted rhythm every few seconds. I walked back along the driver's side, flashlight beam cutting across my own tire tracks, the scrub beyond, the dull gleam of the landing gear. When I reached the back doors, my breath clouded in front of me. The metal hasps were rimmed with frost, even though the air outside wasn't that cold. The stainless steel padlock hung solid and white with rime. The seal, a bright blue plastic strip stamped with the shipper's ID, was intact. Hard. No cracks. I stared at it, bolt cutters in hand. I didn't wait to see if anything else moved. I grabbed the doors and slammed them shut. The vapor puffed out around the seals, then was cut off. The hasps clanged back into place. I shoved the padlock through with fingers that had gone stiff from cold and something else. On the walk back to the cab, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in that stretch of desert anymore. Every shadow looked too thick. Every gust of wind felt like it had weight. When I climbed back into the driver's seat and shut the door, the cab light flicked on, flickered twice, then steadied. My own breath fogged the inside of the glass for a moment longer than it should have. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. For a while, the reefer was the only thing I could hear. Thump, hum, cycle. The in-dash temp readout stayed glued to -18 degrees. No codes, no alarms. Then the CB, which had been dead all night, crackled. Half a burst of static. Then nothing. Unit. My dispatcher's voice finally came through, fuzzy at the edges. Getting an alert, you stopped. Everything okay? I looked at the mirror, at my own trailer stretching back behind me, pale in the night. Yeah, I lied. Thought I had a mechanical. Load's fine. Reefer's solid. You didn't open it, did you? He asked. Shipper's strict on that one. I swallowed. My hand still felt like it was holding metal colder than it should be. No, I said. Didn't touch the doors. The CB hissed quietly for a moment. Then he moved on to something about my ETA. I answered on autopilot. Part of me was still in that box, staring at an empty body bag and a frost trail leading straight to my boots. A couple hours later, just before dawn, I hit the inbound way station outside Salt Lake. Lights blazing, DOT boys out in jackets, breath steaming as they waved rigs through. My luck. Arrow over my lane flashed inspection. I rolled onto the pad, followed the officer's hand signals, set the brakes. He came up to the window, asked for the usual license registration logs. Eyes flicked to the reefer unit, then to the seal record on his clipboard. You're my medical load, he said. They want this one verified. We're gonna pop the doors, count units. You can stand by. My stomach dropped a little. He walked back with another officer, both of them silhouettes in the sodium lights. I watched in the mirror as they checked the seal. New strip, replacement from dispatch at the origin. Then clipped it with their own cutters. Padlock popped. Doors opened. Cold vapor rolled out, pale clouds in the lot lights. They stepped inside, flashlights cutting through the fog. Looked around. One of them started counting off numbers, voice carrying faintly to my cab. 6, 8, 10. A minute later, they shut the doors again. One of them scribbled something on a form. The other slapped a fresh seal on. The first officer came back to my window, handed my paperwork up. 16 units, he said. All sealed. No irregularities. You're good to roll. All sealed. I asked before I could stop myself. He gave me a look. Yeah, all zipped. All tagged. No tampering. I glanced at my mirrors. The trailer sat quiet and white behind me. Reefer humming. No fog leaking from the edges. No frost trails on the bumper. Everything okay, driver? The officer asked. I forced a nod. Yeah, long night. That's all. He stepped away, waved me out with a half-gloved hand, already looking at the next truck. I pulled off the pad and back onto the highway toward the delivery point, the sky going from black to gray above the peaks. I made the drop, backed into a dock, unhooked, watched men in heavy coats and gloves roll those gurneys down ramps, body bags frosted and stiff as they disappeared into a facility that smelled like bleach and metal. No one screamed. No one thumped on walls. No one mentioned missing anything. On paper, the load was perfect. 16 in, 16 out. No broken seal on record. No incident report. Nothing. Just me, a bolt cutter, and the memory of that empty bag in a row of frozen dead. I still pull reefers sometimes. Money's too good not to. I've even hauled medical loads again. But I always check the manifest twice. I always listen harder when the reefer hums. And I never, ever admit that the scar on 2 of my fingers came from grabbing a door handle that felt like it was being held from the other side. Because out there, somewhere between Phoenix and Salt Lake, I broke a seal I wasn't supposed to. And I'm pretty sure something inside took the chance to leave early.